Rom. He's set to make his major league debut tonight.
Came over in the Jack Flaherty deal with the Orioles and has thrown the ball extremely well in his 2 starts with Memphis and gets a great opportunity here.
Deep third. There's Arenado, and look at this play. Safe at first. 1-0 Pittsburgh. Joe, he ran all the way to third, and he scores on the wild pitch. Deep to right. It is gone. A 3-run blast.
And that's it for Rom. His big league debut is complete.
Look at that first inning. He easily could have been out of that inning a lot earlier, forced him to throw some extra pitches there. Didn't command the baseball as well as he wanted to, or as well as we needed. Wasn't laying in the off speed, so had to use the four seam a little more than usual. But I feel like his stuff could play better than what he showed today.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. That's what it sounded like on Bally Sports Midwest last night. And Drew Rom's major league debut, it did not go according to plan.
That was brutal.
To put it lightly. Finished the game just ugly. 3 2/3 innings, 8 hits, 6 earned runs, 4 strikeouts. You like seeing that. Unfortunately, he also had a good portion of the walks there as well. Threw about 50-50 ball strikes. It wasn't pretty. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it was. The first inning did get away from him. And if you're somebody that felt a little more confident or felt like people are being mean to Drew Rom today because we're being critical of his performance, that's probably where you would point. Hey, there were a couple of defensive plays that weren't made behind him, a couple of balls that ended up kind of dropping that maybe wouldn't have in a typical game. Maybe next time it looks a little better. All of those are fair caveats. But T-Bone, one of the things that I was most interested whenever they brought up Drew Rom was to find out if his stuff can play at this level. It's why I think it was smart to get this opportunity for Drew Rom, and why, honestly, I would continue finding out over the next 6 weeks what you have in Drew Rom is, let's see if this can play at the major league level, because there's no guarantees that it ever will. Last night might have been the norm for Drew Rom at the major league level. He might be a 4A pitcher. There's nothing wrong with that, but that could be what his future is. And last night, I think you saw some signs of how that could take place. He got just 4 swings and misses on the 38 swings that he induced. To put it in perspective, the exact same lineup that Drew Rom faced, Casey Lawrence, who is nobody's definition of a quality starting pitcher at the major league level, he got 11 swings and misses on the 42 swings that he induced. So Rom got about half as many in terms of the percentage rate as Casey Lawrence got last night. They weren't swinging at anything outside of the zone, and that was what he had a calling card for down in the minor leagues. When Drew Rom was down there, he was getting guys to swing at those pitches that were outside of the zone. He doesn't throw in the zone a lot. It's like a 50-50 mix in terms of throwing in versus out. But in the minors, because people are free swingers and they don't have the same pitch recognition, they're swinging at his stuff. They're chasing at it outside of the zone. Last night, 13% chase rate, which is terrible. 6 swings on the 47 pitches that he threw outside of the zone. That's not going to work at this level. And if it continues at that rate moving forward, he's going to be nothing more than a 4A pitcher that can be a spot starter for you, kind of in the Tyler Lyons type of a role. If he improves on that next time around, maybe he could be something more. But T-Bone, that was the good and the bad of last night. What'd you see from Drew Rom?
Yeah, I saw that his stuff may not play here at the major league level. And I was skeptical of that because it just doesn't make sense how he had so much swing and miss while he's averaging like 89 on his fastball. And that's what he ended up. He averaged 90.3 on his fastball last night, miles per hour. I didn't think that could play at the major league level. I was skeptical of it. I know he had success in Memphis, but look at his time in Baltimore's AAA affiliate with Norfolk. Had a 5.34 ERA in his 18 starts. So, like, I was skeptical to see if that would translate to the major leagues. I was excited going into last night's game to find out. I think we found out. Like, I just can't see it working.
You're out.
I'm out. I'm sorry, Drew Rom. It's over.
3 2/3 innings. T-Bone is done.
It's
90
done.
pitches. That was enough for you.
If you want to look at a positive, Casey Lawrence throws about as hard as him, and he had somewhat of success last night. Now, I just can't see it working for him. And look, I hate to give up on him after one outing, but you saw it's going to be hard for his stuff to translate to the big leagues. Like, now you have to throw hard. You need to be throwing 93, 92 at the minimum. If you're going to have a fastball that's going to have life and gets outs on it. Swing and miss didn't translate. As you said, they weren't chasing anything outside the zone, and they could time up his fastball pretty well last night. So I just have a tough time seeing how he's going to be a success story at the big league level. I think I'm out after one start. Like, I was fearful that would be how it would translate into that game.
So you're out. I'm skeptical, but not out. I would like to see more of him. Let's hear what Ollie Marmol had to say after the game last night.
We got a lot mentally, and it's draining, so I'd like to definitely see him again because I think it'll show better than what we saw today.
There you go. So Ollie Marmol wants to see a little bit more of Drew Rom. Not sure if Al Raboski wants to see any more of Drew Rom, though. Let's take a listen to the Bally Sports Midwest post-game show, which, let's be totally frank and candid, you don't hear a ton of criticism on this show because, it's the Cardinals' flagship. Here's what they had to say about Drew Rom's debut last night.
So 3 2/3 innings, he gives up 8 hits, he walks 4, and that's just unacceptable. And like I said, I don't like to judge a guy in his first appearance because, there are nerves. He's only 23 years of age, but I didn't really see anything with that to get really excited. I didn't think he had any pitch that was really a major league quality. He couldn't locate his fastball. It was only 90-91. He couldn't throw a breaking ball for a strike. In his splitter, most of the time he threw it, it was wild, high and away to a right-handed batter. Early in that game, all you had to do was concentrate on the ball away, and really you could take away the splitter, you could take away the slider, and you could just look fastball.
Didn't have a single pitch that was major league quality. That is not what you want to hear about your debut in Major League Baseball. Listen, man, it's one thing to say, like, hey, he got hit around, it didn't work for him. Like, there were times tonight, we're going to see Johan Oviedo for the Pittsburgh Pirates. There were times early in his Major League career where it was very clear, like, hey, this guy just isn't ready. The stuff is there. His fastball plays at this level. He's just not developed yet to be a Major League starting pitcher. That's not what they said about Drew Rom last night. No, a former major leaguer, a guy that has seen a good fair share of baseball in Al Raboski is out there saying this guy did not have a single pitch that was major league quality, and it's hard to disagree. It really is. His fastball just did not play last night. And again, I come out a little more optimistic than T-Bone does. I come out and say, hey, if that first inning goes a little differently, I don't think it snowballs on him the way that it did last night. But even if it does go a little differently, maybe we're talking about giving up 5 earned runs instead of 8. Maybe we're talking about him going 4 2/3 or 5 innings instead of 3 2/3 innings. None of those things are great. I think Drew Rom's ceiling at the major league level, and yes, I know we've seen one start by him, and this is probably putting too much on one start. But I think given the stuff that we saw from him last night, I think you can judge him on that. I think his ceiling's like a 5-starter. 5-starter that maybe swings back and forth between that and a long reliever. Again, if that is one piece of the trade for Jack Flaherty, you ended up doing okay because most of the time you get nothing in return. But it's certainly not super exciting. Yeah. TK Roby, more exciting. Sagasi, more exciting.
Kloffenstein,
more exciting.
I think.
There's a lot of guys down in the minor leagues that they got at the deadline that offer a little bit more of a high ceiling than what you're getting from Drew Rom. Drew Rom was the floor prospect that they traded for. They traded for him because he's very close to the major leagues and because there's a chance he becomes a back end of the rotation starter. And really, he's probably going to project to be a guy that starts out at AAA every season and maybe starts 5 games for you in any individual season moving forward.
Yeah, and to your point, like, we've seen guys that throw 90 that can have success. Problem was, I just feel like there was no life on anything last night. And that's the thing, when we talk about stuff, like when you look at Wainwright, not this year, but last year, he didn't throw hard, but you could see the movement on his pitches. He had life. He had a sinker that moved. The curveball was good.
He pitches mostly with his curveball.
Yeah.
Like, he's a guy that's like 50% curveball. Last night, it was like 70% fastballs from Drew Rom.
Yeah, and there was no life on it. It's just a straight four seam. Like, that's an easy pitch to kind of time up, especially when you can eliminate everything else because the stuff wasn't there. I think you're right. I think his ceiling is, at best, he's probably a long reliever or a number 5 starter that kind of swings back and forth. Honestly, a 4A player is what he is, probably at his ceiling. And I know that some texters are critical. 314 called me an idiot for giving up on him after one start and said I should take my blank and baseball takes home. Well, that's one way to frame it. But I just saw the stuff yesterday. Like, when you throw 95 and you have stuff, you can get away with bad command.
Yep.
You can, because they don't know where it's going. You don't know where it's going, but your stuff plays to where it's tough to hit. When you're throwing 90, you can't get away with not having command. And he didn't have any secondary stuff last night, so it's just easy picking for major league hitters. I just can't see him having success at the big league level unless it is what we're talking about, where he becomes a number 5. That's what he tops out at. Probably going to be like a guy that has a 5 ERA. There just wasn't a lot of optimism to come away from last night's game.
And somebody on the text line makes a fair point. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Guys, this kid clearly has something. He struck out 18 batters in 11 innings down in the minors for the Cardinals. And this is why I have said all along, I want to see the players that they view as having any kind of a role in 2024 in the major leagues down the stretch. Because let's find out what major league hitters do against them. Minor league hitters are just different, man. It is. When you go down to AAA, these guys are swinging at stuff outside of the zone. They don't have the same pitch recognition, and they don't have the same swing decisions. If you throw something outside of the zone to Lars Nootbaar or Brendan Donovan, they're going to spit on that all day long, especially if you do so without having any sort of a secondary pitch that they've got to take account of. So when you come up to the big league level and you've got a fastball that you're throwing 90 miles an hour and you've got really nothing that's playing off of it and the fastball is straight and they can just sit on it, guess what's going to happen? They're going to sit on a 90 miles an hour fastball, and every single one of these guys at the big league level has seen that a million times in their life. They're going to crush it a decent amount of the time. And last night, he ended up giving up a hard hit 9 separate times. 9 times a ball came off the bat at 95 miles an hour or more, 5 times at least 105 miles per hour. That would have been about as hard as any hit that Mason Wynn had this year at the AAA level. To put that in context, 5 times he gave that up last night. So I'm not giving up on Drew Rom. I'm not suggesting that he has no major league future. But what I am saying is his stuff severely limits what he is going to be capable of unless he adds a serious weapon as a secondary pitch. And so when you have a guy like this, you want to find out how batters at the big league level reacts to him and then adjust accordingly. Maybe now he goes back down to AAA and tries to work on a new secondary pitch. Maybe that's something his offseason plan will incorporate now. Or maybe the Cardinals now look at it and say, okay, what we saw at the AAA level, probably a bit of a mirage. Can he factor into our plans as the 10th starter next year if we need to go that deep into our rotation? Yes, absolutely you can. Can we factor him in as the 6th starter, though? No, that probably should not be the plans for the Cardinals going into next season, and they'll adjust accordingly. So it was good to see him. I think we'll probably see him again at some point this year, even if it's not 5 days from now, and we'll see if he's able to improve on it from there.
Yeah, and to your point of getting a chance to see what it looks like at the big league level, now he knows and now he can work on it. And that is a good thing. And look, I know I'm coming off negative as a guy that's given up on him. Look, he can make changes. He, like you said, I thought his slider played well in the minor leagues. Maybe that was just nerves from last night. Maybe that was that secondary pitch that we're talking about. But there's a lot that needs to be proven to show that he is a major league caliber pitcher after last night's outing, because there's just not a lot of stuff when you're throwing 90 miles an hour. It's really hard to have success in baseball when you're not throwing hard.
One thing that I would like to see is the Cardinals be competitive again. I'm not asking for them to win games. I'm really not. But when you're losing 8-0 in the final game of the series against the Oakland Athletics, and then you lose 7-1 against the Mets, 13-2 against the Mets, and 11-1 against the Mets, and that has all taken place over the last 6 games, dude, at some point, you at least got to show a little bit of life. You're seeing Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt being taken out of games in the 7th, 8th, or 9th inning regularly right now. That's got to stop. I'm not asking for you to win, but can we be a little bit more competitive? Just a little bit. Just like 6-3 type of games. Lose 6-3. Have a little bit of dignity in these losses. That's all I'm asking for.
Let me get through 9 innings. You know, last night I could turn that off after the 6th.
That's Tanner Hendrickson. He's Grant Francis working the board for us today. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we're diving into some NFL quick hitters, including a 24-game winning streak was put on the line last night in Monday Night Football, and it came to an end. I'll get T-Bone's big-time thoughts on that coming up in about 15 minutes. But next, how do the Blues apply the lessons that came last season from the Golden Knights? We'll talk about it here on 101 ESPN. So T-Bone came into the office today and said, BK, I know what the Blues can learn from the Vegas Golden Knights in their Stanley Cup championship season. I said, that's interesting, T-Bone. What is it? Because it's mid-August. The Cardinals are really bad right now, and I would be fascinated to know what the Blues can learn in order to get back to the Stanley Cup. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. So T-Bone, there was an article earlier today from Jesse Granger over on The Athletic, and he wrote, the lessons that can be learned from the Golden Knights Stanley Cup Championship. When you read this article and you were pulling out the nuggets that could potentially be applied to the St. Louis Blues, what immediately came to mind for you?
I think the number one thing for me when I was reading this article was the guys that go to the front of the net. I can't tell you how often we came in after Blues came in and went, oh my gosh, nobody's in front of the net. Just put your butt in front of the goalie and try and get some rebound opportunities. And I think that's the biggest thing for the Vegas Golden Knights. Reading this piece, Cassidy, during that playoff run and that Stanley Cup run for the Vegas Golden Knights, made sure on each line that he had at least one forward that was going to go to the front of the net. And then that way he could have two forwards that would be kind of that skill guys that could be skating around, help create offensive chances. They led the playoffs in 10 rebound goals in the playoffs last year to the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think that's one of the biggest things for the St. Louis Blues is I think they do have a pretty good offensive talent group overall for the St. Louis Blues. The problem is they've got to get to the front of the net. They got to go to the dirty areas and get those hard-earned goals. And then the other thing for me, too, that kind of ties into this was the length of their defense. And now the Blues can't really fix that. They're kind of defensive core they're kind of stuck with right now. They're not going to be able to make any moves, I would assume, before the season starts. But they also, the Vegas Golden Knights, only gave up 4 rebound opportunities that allowed goals. So it's going to be the front of the net. The front of the net is going to be the biggest thing that determines the Blues from, in my opinion, a playoff team and a team that's going to be sitting at home here once we get to the Stanley Cup playoffs this year.
I think that's the biggest thing, both defensively and offensively. Like on the defensive side of the puck, how many times last year we talk about the backdoor tap-ins, but the Blues defensemen just not willing to really get to the front of the net and box players out, and it was just easy access to the front of the net. And then on the offensive side of the puck, I mean, how many one-and-dones did we see last year where the puck would get to the front of the net and it'd be an easy clear-out for the other team because nobody was there for the Blues? So you look at the teams like Vegas that had success, even go back to 2019 when the Blues had success. Like, look at Ryan O'Reilly. Think about all the big goals that he scored in the final or in the playoffs. A lot of them were right in front of the net. So I think that's a big thing for the Blues going into next season and in the future is just being able to get to the front of the net and on the defensive side, protect the net a little bit more.
Would you say rebounds are a good thing in the NHL? Like when you're on offense, you've got the puck in the offensive zone and you shoot the puck on the net and you get a rebound opportunity and you shoot it again and it qualifies for a shot. That's a good thing, right? You're putting pucks on net. We like that around here in St. Louis.
Yeah, I love that.
Would you like to be first in that or 32nd in that?
I prefer first.
NHL rankings.
Not 32nd.
The Blues last year were last.
That makes sense.
Dead last in the NHL in rebound opportunities, shots for last season. Now, if I was saying on the other side of things, shots against on the rebounds, would you rather be like at the top of that leaderboard or the bottom of that leaderboard? Most rebound shots given up or fewest rebound shots given up?
I'd prefer to be at the fewest, but I got a feeling I know where this is going.
They were 5th last year in terms of the 5th most rebound shots against last season.
I thought we were going to be first.
They had the worst case scenario where the teams around them on the rebound shots against were Anaheim, Columbus, Montreal. The teams around them in terms of rebound shots for, this is a bad thing, Montreal, the Rangers, the Chicago Blackhawks, and Arizona. The Blues both were terrible at allowing rebounds and also terrible at creating rebounds for them last year. So your defensemen need to create a little bit more mess in front of the net, and your forwards have to be willing to go to the net. I think one thing that you said earlier, T-Bone, that I really liked was each of the lines from Cassidy had one guy at least that can get to the net and will create space for the other forwards. I think that's something that the Blues severely lacked last season. And I think it showed up in a big way. And I don't know that they've totally fixed that problem going into 2023.
Agreed.
I think you have guys that project to be able to do that. Jake Neighbors, I think, can be one of those players. I think he can create space for his line mates. I think Braden Shin does that on a pretty consistent basis, especially when he's not hurt going into the season. I think Brandon Saad has the ability to do it. I think sometimes he floats around the edges a little bit more than you'd like, but I think he can go to the front of the net if needed. I think Buchnevich can be that guy as well. He plays with some serious physicality when he really wants to. I love Pavel Buchnevich, so this is not me calling him out. But that's just something that at times he does it, other times he doesn't. It's a little bit inconsistent in that regard. I think Kapanen might be able to do that. I think it was one of the things that frustrated the Penguins was that he didn't do it more often. But when you look at the way that they can construct the lines this year, you could have one guy in each of the lines. It just requires some of these guys to take that step that they didn't take a year ago.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think they've got guys that can do it, but are you going to be willing to do it? That's the biggest difference. And again, I think that's the biggest thing for the St. Louis Blues. I think they've got the offensive pieces to be a high-flying, scoring team, but how do you get yourself to the next level? And I think getting to the next level, and I think this team is going to need that, is making sure that you're getting to the front of the net. Because I think the only guy that I can really point to that I feel like consistently did that last year would be Toropchenko and Blais when they got here. That's it. Everybody else, to your point,
good one.
I think everybody else, to your point, yeah, at times we've seen it, but you got to do it consistently if you're going to be a team that's going to take advantage of those rebound opportunities. And we know the defensive issues that the team had, and we saw that last year. That's just going to come from a rebound defensively from the defensive core. But I think the offense, you need to see some of those guys, Kapanen, Saad, Jake Neighbors, maybe Kevin Hayes is this guy too, that need to start getting to the front of the net and start creating some of those dirty area, gritty goals that they were just lacking last year.
So some of their top prospects, I think, fit into this criteria, by the way. I think Dvorsky projects to be able to do some of this. Jimmy Snuggerud certainly has a shot that can play from anywhere, but he could get to the front of the net as well. He's got a little physicality to his game. I think Jake Neighbors obviously has this. Zach Dean projects to be one of these guys as well. One of the players that does not project to be one of these types of get to the front of the net and earn those gritty goals is Zach Bolduc. And earlier today, over on The Athletic, there was another piece, and they ranked all of the prospects in the Blue system right now. I kept scrolling down and scrolling down and scrolling down, and I was like, at some point, I've got to see Zach Bolduc's name on here. He's typically been 1 or 2 in the Blue system in terms of the top prospects. Well, in this latest piece, they have him at number 7, and I think the write-up as to why they have him that low in terms of the Blues prospect pool is pretty interesting. I want to read this from you. It's from The Athletic's prospect writer. Bolduc is a tough evaluation for me. Put up great numbers in the queue the last few seasons. He has NHL talent. He's got great skating. He's really good hands and a really good shot as well. He can run the power play flank like a pro due to his offensive skill, his brains, and his lethal one-timer shot. There is, however, a concern about how much his game is going to translate to the NHL due to his compete level. He's not completely devoid of compete, but he is a perimeter-oriented forward who can be a bit inconsistent with his effort, even though he does have some physicality to his game. That is partially why he was cut from Canada's under-20 team. He's so talented that I think he'll end up playing NHL games, but I would like to see a lot more interior offense that will translate to the league before I say he's going to have a legitimate NHL career, end quote. Again, that all came from The Athletic. That is quite the scathing review of Zach Bolduc in a prospect write-up. They have him 7th among the Blues prospects this season. They ranked him as a below-average NHL compete level. T-Bone, I think he is the guy, when we go into camp this year, among the Blues prospects that is at the biggest crossroads right now. He's 20 years old. He is still an incredibly young player. This does not mean that his NHL career has no chance if it goes poorly for him at camp. However, I think there is a point in time, and that time may be now, where the Blues need to see something that shows them this is going to change. There is going to be more compete to your game. You are going to project to be a guy that can fit into a Craig Berube system. Because if you can't, Dean, Neighbors, Dvorsky, Stenberg, Snuggerud, these guys can, and they're all coming. And these guys are all passing you up right now on the depth chart, and that's not including anybody that's already in this NHL lineup. There will come a point in time where he gets squeezed out the way that we've seen so many Cardinals outfielders get squeezed out over the years. And that could come back to bite the Blues. But if this evaluation is on par with what we have heard also around the Blues, I think Bolduc is the guy that has the most at stake going into this year's camp.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a make or break camp for Bolduc because hearing Army talk at the draft when he had his media availability, it sounds like this is the camp that they're going to decide on what Zachary Bolduc's future is as a St. Louis Blue. Whether that is a guy that they are planning to have with the team in years to come, or it's a guy that they're planning on using as a trade chip to help them out in any way possible. Because hearing Army talk, like they were excited about his first camp, but then the second camp they said was kind of a letdown. They wanted to see more of that compete, as we just mentioned, and we'll see what he looks like here in camp. And Grant, you mentioned you were at prospect camp and getting a chance to watch him, and he's going to have to start showing signs of, hey, I am a guy that you need to be banking on for the future, because as BK said, they've got a lot of guys that could kind of leapfrog him as we get closer to camp.
Yeah, as you were reading that, BK, like that's the first thing I was thinking about was that's the perfect description of what I felt watching him at prospect camp. And I try to take that with a grain of salt just because it is prospect camp, but at the same time, you're a prospect that is trying to make a stride to make the club this upcoming season, so you'd think that there'd be a lot of effort going into it. And what I saw, especially on the defensive side of things, was a lot of floating in and out. Yep. And that's not what you want to see from a guy like Bolduc who's trying to break the roster. And it goes back to the conversation we just had, too, about, the Blues need guys that are going to be in the right areas, want to go to the front of the net, all that good stuff. They've got the talent. The Blues have a ton of talent. They need work ethic. And for prospects that do want to make the team, that's how you're going to do it. And for Bolduc, it's going to be even more difficult for him because that's not how he plays the game. It's just not. The way I said it before the show was he's an Edmonton Oiler. That's how he feels watching him. And that's going to be tough, like you said, to work with that in a Craig Berube system.
It's like being a position player in Major League Baseball and being a bat that people really like, but not having any of the defense. It's really hard to make it that way. You have to be Jordan Walker to get to the big leagues and stick regularly if you're going to be that bad defensively in Major League Baseball. You can make it, but it's really, really difficult. The easier path to the big leagues, average bat with a great defensive ability to play all over the diamond. Those are the guys that get to the big leagues and then stick for 15 years. Think about for you in the audience right now, 314-399-9646. If you want to text somebody in that fits that criteria that I just named, you could text 50 different players that have played for the Cardinals over the past 15 years. All of them apply to that because it's easier. It's easier to get to the big leagues that way. The same thing is true in the NHL, man. How do you think a guy like Nikita Alexandrov made it to the NHL? How do you think a guy like Toropchenko got to the league? You get there because of your work ethic. You stick because of your skills. The opposite is much harder to be true, and Zachary Bolduc is learning that the hard way right now. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we're getting into some questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. But next, a 24-game win streak was put on the line last night on Monday Night Football, a game that everybody was watching from coast to coast. And T-Bone has his biggest takeaways from the Ravens winning streak coming to an end next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and I've got some exciting news for all of the men out there. Victory Men's Health has launched a new telehealth site. It's called Victory RX, and men, you can go there to get prescribed your ED medication. They have made this process so incredibly easy. Men can go there, go to the site, victoryrx.com. That's victoryrx.com. You'll do your entire consult all via text. Victory Men's Health is well known around the area. They've treated thousands of men in their standalone locations, and now, regardless of where you're listening from right now, you can have easier access to that #1 selling ED medication. It's a chewable tablet. It's got active ingredients with both Viagra and Cialis. And because it's a chewable tablet, you don't have to worry about whatever it is that you had earlier in the day, whether you ate, you drank, whatever it was. That's not going to affect the chewable tablet. That's one of the reasons why Victory Men's Health went with this, because it's going to have the correct dosage for you that works the first time around. VictoryRx.com. That's VictoryRx.com. Go there and you'll be able to play hard.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, Drew Rahm's MLB debut did not go well. Pittsburgh takes it 11-1 in the series opener. That will continue today with Game 2. It'll be Adam Wainwright on the mound for the Cardinals, looking for win number 199, going up against Johan Oviedo for Pittsburgh. First pitch will be at 6:05. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your oath and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. A big game last night. I know all of you were tuned in on ESPN as a 24-game preseason winning streak came to an end. The Washington Commanders ended it for the Baltimore Ravens in what was a barn burner last night. T-Bone, I know you were locked into this one. What was your biggest takeaway from the Ravens' 24-game preseason winning streak officially coming to an end?
I hate this is even a storyline. Who the hell cares about the preseason? Man, Washington's out here playing what they call a starting quarterback in Sam Howell.
Hey,
Baltimore's not even
185 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Great game from our guy Sammy.
Against what, the third string of Baltimore's defense? Like, come on. This isn't even a storyline. I can't believe that this has gained so much traction. Everybody's like, oh, I wonder if the streak's going to continue. And I saw people saying, oh, the spread's low. You're betting on preseason football? Oh, come on. Who cares? It's the preseason, man.
Did you hear Sam Cosme's comments about this? He's the offensive tackle for the Washington Commanders. They asked him prior to the game last night. They asked him about the potential of putting an end to the Baltimore Ravens' 24-game winning streak in the preseason. And he said, who gives a bleep about the preseason? So when the players are agreeing with you, I think we can all go ahead and write this one off. I do not care. I think it is kind of wild that they won 24 straight preseason games. Just think about whoever it is that you root for, think about the wild ways in which you've either won or lost a preseason game. Like, the weirdest stuff happens in the fourth quarter of a preseason game. Literally anything could happen. It's like watching Mad Max Fury Road for preseason football. Because, like, your quarterback could throw 3 pick sixes and you'd be like, yeah, that happens. Like, that's the way that it goes. He's a 4th string quarterback that wasn't even good in college. He was a backup to their starter at Alabama or whatever for 3 years. And now he's playing for us in quote-unquote meaningful snaps. So for them to be able to win 24 straight games, despite playing 3rd and 4th stringers for like half of those opportunities, it is pretty impressive, honestly. It speaks to the depth of their roster, but that's as far as I'm willing to go with the accomplishment of winning 24 straight.
How the hell are you supposed to win with Josh Johnson? I didn't know this guy was still in the league.
Dude, he's played for 14 teams.
Unbelievable.
14 teams. You know the immaculate grids that are going around that everybody's playing right now? I feel like that is a T-bone game.
If you don't know, just throw him in there.
Seriously, he's a free square. He's a free square for half of the teams in the league. But yeah, Josh Johnson was the quarterback last night for them. All right, so let's get to some real NFL news. T-Bone, yesterday it came out that the Indianapolis Colts have given other teams permission to seek a trade with Jonathan Taylor. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Jonathan Taylor is a very good running back, but whether you believe it or not, he seems to have some sort of an injury going on right now. He was legitimately injured last year, and he's going through a contract dispute. The Colts are reportedly looking for the equivalent of a first-round pick, so probably something similar to what the Panthers got in return for Christian McCaffrey. And you then have to pay Jonathan Taylor, because that's been the whole thing. The whole reason he's not showing up to Colts camp is, I want to get paid. T-Bone, who's the team that's going to give up at least a second-round pick, let's say, and then pay for Jonathan Taylor to be their running back? Do you see anybody?
No, I don't see anybody that's going to have interest in Taylor for that price because of the injury. And then we've seen how this has worked with running backs. Nobody wants to pay them anymore, and they shouldn't want to pay them anymore. Once you get to this point, you just play the franchise tag game with them, and then you just kind of cut bait. I don't really see anybody that makes sense to bring him in because of that back injury. If he was healthy, I think maybe it's a different conversation, but I just don't see a fit for anybody. I think he's going to be a Colt once the season gets underway.
Does it make sense for him to try to get like a 1-year contract, like a prove-it deal?
Got it.
So, like, why not do that, especially after last season where he was injured? Like, prove yourself. If you want to get paid, prove it.
Because if I'm another team, I'm not trading a second-round pick for a running back on a one-year contract. I want him for longer, but at the same time, he's a running back, so do I actually want him for longer? I think he's between a rock and a hard place here. I think he believes he's got more leverage than he actually does. I don't know who the team is, man. Like, point out the team to me that makes sense for him, and I'll say, okay, yeah, purely from a football perspective, it makes a lot of sense for, like, Kansas City. If you put him in Kansas City, is he better than Isaiah Pacheco? Absolutely. Are the Chiefs giving up a second-round pick, though, for the right to pay Jonathan Taylor when they've got to pay Chris Jones and they've got some serious free agents after? No, they're not doing that. Would he make a lot of sense to go to the Miami Dolphins? Yeah, sure. Are they going to pay him significant money when they've already got Tyreek Hill making a ton of money and they've got to pay Jalen Waddle sooner rather than later and they've got a defense where a bunch of their stars are making big money? I don't really think so. I don't know who the team is. I really don't. I tried going through it last night to find the team that makes sense. I don't know that there is one. Unless you're like the Cardinals, you say he's going to be a part of our rebuild process. But if you're the Cardinals, do you want a running back to be a significant piece of the rebuild process? No, you really don't.
Yeah, and there's the other thing that I thought about this when I saw this news come out is there a team that's willing to say we're all in this year? Because that's what I think of when the 49ers acquired McCaffrey. Sure. Was, hey, we're all in. We're going for it.
Maybe the Eagles, but they never make moves like this. Yeah. They don't value running backs.
And, like, again, they don't really need a running back right now to say that they're all in. Like, there's just not a team for me. Like, maybe Miami but with Miami, to your point on one, they got to get ready to pay Waddle. They don't even know what their quarterback situation looks like past this year. Tua's got to prove he can stay healthy to be the franchise quarterback. So I just cannot see a team. I think he's going to be a Colt by the time we get going.
Yeah, I think the team could have been the Jets if they didn't just sign Dalvin Cook.
Maybe.
Like the team that you would say to yourself, okay, they are all in. They could not. All the chips that they had are in the middle of the table, and they are like smoking a cigar with a glass of whiskey next to them, just waiting on what they're going to end up with this hand. That's where they're at. I don't think another team exists that's in that spot right now. Like, the Chiefs are trying to be a perennial contender. The same thing is true for the Jaguars, the Bengals. And these teams all have pretty solid running backs at worst. So I think what we might end up seeing is this is going to play itself out until at least the trade deadline. And then if and when a team ends up with a running back that gets hurt, maybe then you see something change here. But until then, I don't see anything changing right now.
It is sad because I feel like there's a lot of running backs out there that have tried to get the money that they feel they deserve, like going all the way back to Le'Veon Bell, like super talented guys, and it feels like every time this happens, they just fall off after.
Yeah, the pendulum has swung almost too far in the opposite direction. Like, if Jonathan Taylor was a free agent right now, I would say it's crazy if nobody wanted to pay him. Yeah. Jonathan Taylor should get his money on the free agent market. The problem is that right now he's attached to a draft pick. And if I'm a team, I look at that second round pick and I say, well, I could just go get the next Jonathan Taylor with that. Or if I have a first round pick that has to be included in this deal, well, why would I trade it for Jonathan Taylor when Jonathan Taylor was a second round pick and now he's had more tread on his tires and I've got to pay him significant money? I would just rather go draft the next guy. So it's really hard to find it with the draft capital attached to him. I would pay him. I would not give up the draft capital for the right to pay him. Final thing here, NFL quick hitters on 101 ESPN. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have made it known that Baker Mayfield is going to be their starting quarterback for the 2023 season. This became pretty clear over the weekend when Kyle Trask came back into the game in like the third quarter because their backup quarterback got hurt. Baker Mayfield did not play in that game. So it was expected that Baker was going to be named the Buccaneers quarterback. T-Bone, you saw a lot of Baker Mayfield last year as the Rams starter. What does this make you think of what the Bucs are going to be in 2023?
I think it makes him a little interesting because Baker does have talent, and I think if he's got weapons, which Tampa Bay does, and they can protect him, I think maybe there's a chance that they become the favorite here in the NFC South. But with that being said, that doesn't mean much because the NFC South sucks. So I think at best, if Baker plays really well, they're like 9-8 this year. Like, I think that's their ceiling. Like, I can't see them being a team that is a serious threat in the NFC. Baker plays well, you're a team that can win the NFC South, and that's like your ceiling, and you're one and done in the playoffs.
I don't think that they can win 10 games or 8 games or 9 games with Baker Mayfield as their quarterback.
What about 7?
No.
6?
I think they're the worst team in the NFC South right now. I think that you look at that division, and whether it's because of their defense, their offense, whatever, I think they are the worst team in that division. I think we are going to look back on this season and say they were one of the biggest disappointments in the offseason for not adding a single quarterback to that mix. How do you not draft anybody? How are you not the team that drafted Will Levis? I'm not saying you had to give up significant capital, but get somebody into that competition. How did they not sign Jacoby Brissett? Why isn't he in Tampa Bay right now? Why isn't he playing the role of Baker Mayfield? Jacoby Brissett was much better last season than Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. They were a competitive team with him behind the center. And now he's the backup quarterback to Sam Howell, and you didn't go get him? That's insane to me. They needed to go out there and add something because the roster should be better. The roster should be good enough to compete, and they gave themselves no chance. Kyle Trask was a backup quarterback in high school. And that dude was the competition for Baker Mayfield going into camp. Just insane.
I also had another former Ram, John Wolford.
He was the one that got hurt?
Well, I guess he's not going to be much of a competition
Apparently,
anymore.
they were also interested in the offseason in Matt Stafford. I was listening to a podcast with Charles Robinson, who said that they called the Rams about Matt Stafford, and the Rams told them, he's not going anywhere. So if you were a Rams quarterback in 2022... the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were interested in you.
Oh, well, that's great.
They got Baker, and they tried to get Matt Stafford.
I'm glad to know that somebody likes all our talent.
Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, Tommy Edman made another spectacular catch in center field last night. Can that be his primary position in 2024? T-Bone hates the idea. He'll explain why coming up in just a little bit. But next, questions and answers here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line at 314-399-9646. All right, this one comes from the 314. Guys, do you think that Andrew Knizner could be a starting catcher for a Major League Baseball team that is trying to compete in 2024?
Yes, I think so. I mean, his offense is taking the next step. He's slugging the ball. He's up to 10 home runs after his home run last night. I think he could be a guy that could be a catcher now. Wouldn't be like a cleanup hitter by any means. He'd probably hit like 8th in a lineup, kind of like what he does for St. Louis. But yeah, I think Knizner's proven he's a everyday starting caliber catcher that could play on a contending team.
The crazy thing about that, too, is that, the big excitement about Wilson Contreras was obviously the offense. Wilson Contreras has 13 home runs this season, and Knizner has 10 in half the games played. If you give Andrew Knizner the same amount of games that Wilson Contreras has, he's on pace to be top 3 on the Cardinals this season in home runs. That's insane.
And it came out of nowhere. Let's be totally fair to the Cardinals on this. I would not have come into this season with Andrew Knizner as my primary catcher either. I thought that would have been a really horrible plan. It would have left you light there. And suddenly Andrew Knizner looks like a above average Major League hitter, not just for his position, but in general. He's been really good offensively for them so far this season in his limited opportunities. I would be very skeptical of this. There has been some of this that has taken, if you just look at the numbers, I think he has 2 or 3 home runs this year off of position players. That does not make up for all of it. His approach looks better this season than it has in years past. I would be skeptical of it, but I do think, given how bad the catcher position is offensively around Major League Baseball, he could at least be adequate. He could be a guy that's a 90 OPS plus, so right below league average offensively. And you feel pretty good about him as your catcher. But it would require you I think he'd be great with the Houston Astros next year. The Astros decided, you know what? We're going to trade for Andrew Knizner. He's going to be our catcher. We're going to extend him. He's going to be super cheap. He's going to play the Martin Maldonado role, where he's batting 8th in our lineup every single day, and we just need him to be well prepared and guiding our pitchers throughout the games. He could be great in a situation like that. I think he could be really good here. If the Cardinals decide to switch what their plans are and say Wilson Contreras is either our everyday DH or he's going to be shipped out elsewhere.
Our left fielder.
Sure. I think you could make a case that Andrew Knizner and Ivan Herrera could be a perfectly capable 1-2 tandem as your catching duo next year.
And I'm fascinated to see what they do this offseason, because I think one of those two, not Contreras, Knizner or Herrera, is going to be one of the biggest trade chips that they've got this offseason. They should capitalize on one of them. They should capitalize on whether selling high on Herrera, because Major League Baseball just hasn't seen a lot of him. He's been great in AAA, and the small sample here at the Major Leagues was pretty impressive too. Or you sell high on Knizner having an offensive year. Another team that stuck out to me when we were talking about this, San Diego could use another catcher to bring into their system to help them out. They would make a ton of sense. So the Cardinals are going to have to capitalize. I think Knizner or Herrera is going to be one of their top trade chips this offseason.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Do you guys think that the Cardinals regret picking Michaelis over Montgomery when it came to the extension the offseason, or does the return for Monty at the deadline end up making up for it? I would regret it. I think Michaelis has been underwhelming this year. I don't think he's been a complete disaster by any stretch, but I think he's been underwhelming, and I think Montgomery, if you just project over the next 2 to 3 seasons who's going to be a better pitcher, I would take Montgomery. So if they were both willing to take the same amount, we don't know that to be true, but if they were, I would rather have Montgomery in the rotation long-term than Miles Michaelis.
Yeah, I think I would too. I think there's more swing and miss to Monty too, and he's younger. So I think, do they regret it? I would say probably yes. I don't know if Monty would have signed here. He is a Scott Boras client, so he's probably one of those guys that was going to go to the market no matter what. But yeah, I think they do have some regrets in terms of trying to bank back on Miles Michaelis. I think this was where they went back to their typical, we've seen him, we feel comfortable with him, so we're going to sign him. We know what Miles Michaelis is. Montgomery, the book was still out coming into the season. He was great in the second half with the Cardinals after being acquired, but everybody across baseball viewed him as a 4. So I think the Cardinals just kind of settled on, okay, we're familiar with Miles Michaelis. Let's make sure we lock him up.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Final thing here. Guys, yesterday I saw that Steph Curry said he's the best point guard in the history of the NBA. Do you agree with that? Do you think Steph will go down as the best point guard
the best pure shooter I think we've seen in the NBA. And he's got the playmaking ability, too, to where he is a passer. He's not just known for his offense. So I think so. I don't know how. I can't see where you could. I would understand the argument for like a Magic Johnson, some of those top point guards.
That would be the one that I would put up next to him.
But the thing is like Johnson never had the shooting ability of Steph. He got his points,
He
but
also had more distributing ability than Steph ever did. Like if you're talking superpowers, Magic's was he could play any position at any time. You could switch him onto any defensive spot and you're good. And two, he was one of the best distributors / playmakers that we've ever seen in the history of the game.
Yeah, I guess I just value the
different.
Offense more from Steph
Sure.
because, I mean, he's a guy, and I'm not saying Magic couldn't do this, but Steph can take over a game and it can just go like that. You go into Curry's fun zone, as I would call it, to where he can go off for 30 and a quarter because of his shooting ability. So I would say Steph's probably the best, in my opinion, of all time.
The thing that I find really interesting about both of those players that we just mentioned is they kind of defined their era of basketball.
Yeah.
Like when you look back to the 80s of basketball, Magic Johnson was like, if we can create a team and we could ideally philosophically design it in a specific way, how would we do it? Well, it would look like what the Showtime era Lakers did in that era of basketball with the way that the rules were and everything. Now, if you were designing a team, how would we do it? Well, we would have a point guard that plays like Steph Curry because the shooting, what it does is it completely changes the gravity. It completely changes the spacing defensively, and it allows for opportunities elsewhere. So given the rules in which they played, they were incredibly different players, but both of them altered how the game is played in some way, honestly. So I would probably still take Magic Johnson right now, but if ever there was a conversation about Magic versus blank as the best point guard ever, this is the first one that I think can be real. Previously, I think it was kind of all made up to be like, hey, what about this guy? What about that? No, we're just putting guys up there to have the conversation. It's like Tom Brady versus blank. No, Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time until proven otherwise. We are now getting into that until proven otherwise conversation when it comes to the point guard position in the NBA. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll play a game of Bet It or Forget It. You give us a scenario, we'll tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on BK and Ferrario. But next, can Tommy Edman be the Cardinals' primary plan in center field going into next season? We'll discuss it here on 101 ESPN.
is hammered towards center. Edman on the run, still going at the wall. He's got it and slams into the padding. What an incredible catch for Tommy Edman.
It's what it sounded like on Bally Sports Midwest last night as Tommy Edman makes yet another impressive play in center field alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. So far this season, Tommy Edman has played 230 innings in center field. And if you look at outs above average, he's a +4 defensively in center field for the Cardinals this season. He's been their best and most productive center fielder so far this year, at least when it comes to that metric. T-Bone, that matches my eye test. When I watch Tommy Edman in center field, I see the balls that he's able to track down out there, and I think it's better than any other center fielder that we've seen. Yes, that includes Dylan Carlson. It's better than Lars Nootbaar. It's certainly better than what we saw out of Tyler O'Neill out there in center as well. So when I look to what he's going to be for the team next season, I do wonder if that's the plan. Because he's not going to be your everyday shortstop. That's Mason Wynn. He shouldn't be your everyday second baseman. That should be, in my opinion, we'll get to this here in a minute, Nolan Gorman. So that displaces Tommy Edman. It puts him out of the infield on an everyday basis and puts him into the conversation for the outfield. I don't want him playing a corner. That devalues what he brings to you defensively. If he's going to play out there, I think center field is the best spot. The question really becomes, is Tommy Edman an everyday player for you? Should he be an everyday player for you? Offensively speaking, the answer is probably no. We're just being totally honest. He's really great. He's kind of like Dylan Carlson against left-handed pitching. He's a below-average hitter against righties. But if he can continue to play this way in center field, he can basically be the equivalent out there to what Harrison Bader was, or what I've talked about them signing Kevin Kiermaier to be. But you already have him on the roster. You don't have to go to free agency and give that guy a multi-year contract, and you don't have to trade anything for him. So for me, my plan going into spring training next year, if I don't trade Tommy Edman this offseason, would be for him to be my everyday starting center fielder. T-Bone, where do you stand on that possibility?
Yeah, I don't like the possibility of him being the everyday center fielder because to me, and maybe this is just the old school in me, to me, you got to have an arm to be a center fielder, and his arm strength just is not there. And look, I don't disagree with the jumps and the defensive run saves. Like, that was a hell of a play last night. But there are multiple times this year where I've been able to point out to where it's a base hit up the middle. Edman comes in to get it. The guy rounds third, and there's just no chance to even get him out at home because Edman doesn't have the arm strength. I think it happened in the Mets series where his throw just goes to the cutoff man because he knows he doesn't have a shot to get the guy out at home. I just think if you're going to be an everyday starting center fielder, you have got to have the arm strength to do it. And that's why, like, I don't mind if Edman is the backup center fielder. Like, in a pinch, if Nootbaar goes down, then Tommy Edman's got to go be the center fielder while he's on the IL. That I'm okay with. I'm okay with having it in a pinch. I don't want to plan on Tommy Edman being an everyday center fielder for me. And to your question of what happens then then he's displaced, then he's on the bench for me, and maybe he's getting platoon starts against left-handed pitching somewhere, and I'll figure that out from there. But to me, I don't want him as the everyday center fielder going into next year. The arm strength is a major knock on him for me.
It's a knock. I just don't know how much it matters. If he's getting to so many of these balls that other guys don't, does that make up for the advances that guys are potentially taking on the bases? So Baseball Savant tracks this now, right? Where they look at how often are guys advancing on those opportunities that they had because you were potentially making a play in the outfield. According to them, there have been 69 opportunities to advance against Tommy Edman. Now, this is going to get into a little bit of math here, but here we go. They have attempted about 48% of the time, and they would assume that you would attempt about 41% of the time against him, which basically means, too long didn't read, they're doing it more often against Tommy Edman than you would expect. They're not trusting his arm. They don't have any sort of confidence that Tommy Edman can throw them out whenever they're advancing. Do I care about that? Do I care about 30 guys over the course of a season advancing an extra base, and then of those guys, maybe it's 20 of them actually making so safely? I don't know. I would say no. I care more about the balls that are hit into a gap in center, right center or left center that Tommy Edman is tracking down, that instead of it becoming a double or a triple, he's able to get to it and it becomes an out. He's able to save pitches for my starter because he's making those plays in center field. I care more about the range and the athleticism and the ability to get a good jump than I do the arm strength that may show up once out of every 10 games. So for me, do I want a good arm in center field? Yes, I would vastly. If Tommy Edman had a center field arm, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. He would just be written in pen next year as your center fielder of the future. But because he doesn't, that's where the conversation does become, in my opinion, very interesting. I think philosophically speaking, if you said, okay, what is your plan in center field? Is it Tommy Edman? Is it somebody else? I would say right now I'm more comfortable with Tommy out there than I am anybody else currently on the roster. And I think if you just held me at gunpoint, BK, you got to make a decision. Do you go out and sign Kiermaier, Pilar, Harrison Bader, or do you run it back with Tommy Edman in center field and hope that Victor Scott is your long-term answer out there? I would go option B. I would rather have Tommy Edman as my center fielder until Victor Scott becomes that guy for me on an everyday basis.
See, and I would go to the free agent market. I do think that stuff matters of, right now, for runners at second base and there's a base hit into center field, he's scoring. That is how much of a knock on Edman's arm it is. And I think you're going to see that. And I think it's going to show up more than the 30 times that you said, because the 30 times is in the small sample size of this year. I think it's going to increase more. And I think as the book comes out more on Tommy Edman, the more teams are going to take advantage of it and try and beat him with his arm. And I think as we've seen, I think teams are going to be able to do that. So it is a major concern for me. And though his range is great, I
mean, it's excellent. It's genuinely one of the best in baseball.
I just think the arm is too important, and I would much rather have a Lars Nootbaar out there, who I think you can get by. And I would say Nootbaar's, I think he's good in center field. I'd say slightly above average is what I would classify Nootbaar as a center fielder. And the reason that I'm okay with doing it too is because it's just kind of a stopgap. I think in 2 years we're talking about Victor Scott being that guy, and Nootbaar's pushed back to a corner. So to me, I would much rather have Lars Nootbaar, or go out to the free agent market and get a Kevin Kiermaier or a Kevin Pilar or Harrison Bader to fill that void, and have Edman as a super utility guy on the bench.
Somebody on the text line asks a fair question. Guys, how does Tommy Edman compare in terms of center fielders with their arm strength? It's not great. The best arm in terms of everyday center fielders that's out there right now is probably Victor Robles. His average throw is coming in at about 94 miles per hour so far this season. Other guys that are right up there, most of them are over 90 miles per hour in terms of their average throw. These guys that are in that category: Kevin Kiermaier, Jose Siri, Harrison Bader, Julio Rodriguez, Michael A. Taylor, Michael Harris. I mean, it's the who's who of good defensive center fielders that have good arms. And then you get down to the guys that are kind of in that Tommy Edman range, which was an 85 in terms of his throws coming out from center field. It's not guys that you think of as being dominant defensive center fielders. It's Cedric Mullins. It's Corbin Carroll, who actually does not have a very good arm, which is interesting to me. It's a little surprising, honestly. Dalton Varsho, Jake McCarthy, a few other guys that are kind of in this range include Matt Vierling, who has been playing center field for a few years now, Mike Yastrzemski, and then one that I find interesting is Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo is the everyday center fielder for the most part for the New York Mets, and he has gotten by with having a weaker arm out there. So the problem is he's also getting on base 38% of the time, so he's making up for it with other abilities that he has, and he's got a really good jump as well. So it's a hard thing to overcome. We have seen teams be able to overcome this. I would say the other part that makes me a little more confident about it is if you have that arm at shortstop. You do have Mason Wynn, who on a relay, for example, can make up for some of the lack of an arm coming from center field. But I would prefer not to have that, but that might be where they're at.
Yeah, I just think with the relay, too, it adds another split second to the difference of it. So, I just rather the ball come from center to home plate. And to the Corbin Carroll point, it's why Arizona's pushed him to left field for most of the season. That's why he's playing in left field, because of the arm strength. So to me, it's just a big difference maker. Maybe I'm just kind of old school in this thinking that you don't necessarily. It's okay to have that great range, and he's going to make up for some of that. To me, it's going to be a wash, too, though, on those base hits that a runner can go from first to third or second to home.
It's a totally fair critique of Tommy Edman playing center field. It's a fair thing to wonder, can this work?
Because I think when you had
long term, can he be a center fielder?
When you had Harrison Bader with a runner at second, it was going to take 2 hits to get that guy home.
We can't keep comparing everybody to Bader. Because Bader
agree,
is one of the best defensive center fielders in all of baseball, and so whoever you put out there is likely to be a notch below.
Even with Nootbaar, then I'll go to Nootbaar. Nootbaar's got a great arm.
Here's the problem. Just on that point, Nootbaar in center field means you've got to start somebody else in left. And this means that you get worse in both spots defensively. Because it's not just Nootbaar versus Edman. It's really Edman versus that left fielder defensively. Like, do you get so much worse defensively because Nootbaar is a notch below and that left fielder is a notch below, and also you're starting Jordan Walker in right field? I think the answer is yes. I think the way that you get your best defensive plus offensive lineup out there on a day-to-day basis is by putting Edman in center field and having Lars Nootbaar in left. And then you have Brendan Donovan as a utility guy that can play all over the diamond, and you make it work that way. And yes, this probably means you have to either cut ties with Dylan Carlson this offseason, or you're bringing him back as a fourth outfielder. I would go with Tommy Edman over Dylan Carlson in center field personally. I think he's better defensively, and he's been more proven and more consistent offensively. If that changes in season, great. Carlson has the arm that you're talking about. He's a at least average defender out in center field no matter what. But I think that's really the conversation, is Edman versus who that left field replacement would be if you had Nootbaar in center.
Yeah, and see, I'm okay with an outfield because I'm running on this assumption of Nootbaar in center. I'm okay with having a Burleson or Donovan in left field then. Like, I would much rather have that than Tommy Edman in center field.
You're really bad defensively.
I don't think you're at. So Edman's range is better than Nootbaar's. We can agree on that. The arm is a significant makeup for me in Lars Nootbaar's case in center field.
But the downgrade from Newt to one of those two that you just mentioned in left is significant.
Yeah, but I think there's a massive downgrade offensively by keeping Edman in the lineup against right-handed pitching. Because now I've got another one. I found Donovan's spot, or even if it's just Burleson. I mean, I think they're both in the lineup against a righty no matter what. But now I've got both those guys in the lineup who are better against right-handed pitching than Tommy Edman is, and I think it makes up for that defensive lapse that you're talking about. So that's where I would push back on when we're talking about this conversation. Because I agree, it's not just Edman versus Nootbaar in center. It is Edman versus whoever else you're putting in left field. But I just, to me, the arm is such a negative because right now, to what I was getting to, I used Bader as the example, pushback, so I'll use Nootbaar.
Sure.
Because we're not comparing anybody to Nootbaar as a center fielder. A base hit, it takes probably 2 base hits now for runners at second base to score a guy in center field with Nootbaar there, because Nootbaar's arm is well known across baseball. Against Tommy Edman, it takes 1. And to me, that's a big difference. And that is a difference between, okay, now the team's going to get 2 hits.
How often is that specific play taking place?
I mean, I've seen it 3 times under Tommy Edman in center field already.
Yeah, and he's played 220 innings out there.
To me, it's a big thing.
220 innings, we've seen three occasions in which this came back to bite them. I've seen 20 occasions of him making a great play defensively already. He's already saved, according to outs above average, 4 runs so far this year in center field. So for me, I would rather have Tommy Edman out there. And this is why I want to see him, by the way, every day the rest of the way in center field. Because now that you have Mason Wynn up, we can see what it looks like. And if it comes back to bite them a bunch with his arm, if what you're saying is true, and in the next, whatever it is, 30 games, he costs them 5 to 10 runs because he's just a terrible thrower of the baseball out there, well, then, yeah, you got to cut the ties. You cannot have him as an everyday center fielder. But I do want to see what it looks like, and I do think that it could work long-term for them in center field, at least until Victor Scott is ready to go in center. Coming up next, let's get to Bet It or Forget It here on 101 ESPN. 714-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. You give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on 101 ESPN. Guys, let's start out with this. Bet it or forget it. Zachary Bolduc is traded by the St. Louis Blues before the start of next season.
Oh, man. I think I'm going to bet it. He's got a lot to prove to kind of leapfrog some of the guys that are already in their system. I said this earlier. I think this is a make-or-break camp for him. I could see where they could try and capitalize on Bolduc to go get something, whether it be a defenseman, if they need something at forward. I could see where they do that because they've got guys like Snugs. They've got Dvorsky that are coming. They've got a lot of forward depth that is coming that they can part with one guy. So I'll bet this.
I'm with you, too. I'll bet that. I just think that the Blues have so many prospects that they're excited about right now, including Bolduc. But when you look at those other prospects going into the year after this upcoming season, I think they're going to be more excited about them watching what Bolduc does this season. So, yeah, I'd bet that, too.
I'd bet it as well. It's a little difficult to find a spot in the lineup for him if he doesn't improve that compete level. You look at what Kyrou has right now in terms of what he brings to the table. If one of Kapanen or Vrana is here long term, it's really hard to be able to find that extra spot in their lineup, especially in the top six, which is probably where you would want him to play if he's going to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and say bet it. T-Bone, what do you got for us?
Bet it or forget it. Ollie Marmol will be a lame duck manager next year. Last year's the final year of his original 3-year contract.
I'm going to bet it. They did this with Mike Schultz.
Well,
I see no reason
he didn't
why.
get to his lame duck here.
He did.
I thought they fired him before
He
with
wasn't
that final year to go.
fired, remember? He was in his final year of his contract, and they just didn't give him an extension.
No, I thought he got to. I thought he got to didn't get to the lame duck year. I thought he had one more year left, and Schilt wanted an extension.
I believe it was the final year of his contract. I'll make sure of that. But either way, yeah, I think that he will. I think it's a pretty bad look if you end up
getting him a contract extension after this year. Yeah, I bet it too. I think he's going to be a guy that's he's going to be on the hot seat going into next year because he's going to have to win to earn the next contract. And I just can't see them giving a contract extension because of what you said, having going to be one of the worst years in 100 years.
You were right, by the way. It was through the 2022 season, which would have been last year. So he did have 1 year remaining on his contract. For some reason, I was under the impression that it was maybe I misremembered it.
I thought so because I remember us talking, I swear, like the week before he got fired, like, hey, I wonder what the extension is going to look like for Mike Schultz. And then it was like, oh, bleep, he's fired.
Yeah.
I'll forget that, by the way. I think that next season it's going to be better than what this season is, and I think they're going to stick with Ollie Marmol through that. For my bet it or forget it, I was actually looking on FanDuel earlier today. They have the team points predictions posted for the NHL upcoming season. They have the Blues set at 88.5 points. That's the line, minus 113 either way. So I'm betting that I'm going to take the over there, the over 88.5 points. What do you guys
Alex
think?
a lot.
Timon, where are you at?
88.5, I'm going to take the under.
They had 81 points last season, to put it in perspective.
Yeah, and I think they played like 500 hockey when they got Vrana and Kapanen, and they're going to have to rely on a lot of things to go right. The defensive core is going to have to step up. I think they're like a 500 hockey team. I think they're probably going to be about where Vancouver was last year, where they had a 506 points percentage and were around like 83 points. I think they're going to be around 81 to 85, and that would be under that. And like if they're sitting borderline, there's a chance they're selling guys at the deadline if Vrana's having a good year, or Kapanen or Blais or Sundqvist. Like, I think that's high. I'm going to take the under. I think they're under 88.5.
I am as well. I've mentioned on the air a few different times. I think that that's probably where they're going to be, like right around that 500 record or so. And while I understand the importance of getting to the playoffs again for this team, I think that Doug Armstrong has enough credibility built up, both in terms of the fan base and the ownership, that if he goes to ownership at the deadline and says, listen, this is the final year that we got to live through this pain, but we have to trade Vrana, we have to trade Kapanen, we've got to try to trade some of these defensemen at the deadline, maybe one or two, to be able to open up spots in the lineup for the rest of the season for young guys to get those opportunities. And then this offseason, this is the year we go. This is the time where maybe we make a big trade, we make a big signing, we go get a splash. And in 2024, that upcoming season, that's when they really end up getting back to their competitive levels. So I think it's 2 years of pain in order for them to get back on track starting next year. I'll take the under.
See, the way I look at it is they only need 4 more wins than last season to hit the over on this. I think they're a 4 wins better team than last season. So I'm taking the over.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. Guys, bet it or forget it. This comes from Thanks, Dad. Tommy Edman's weak arm is better than a strong, inaccurate arm. So basically, Tommy Edman's arm in center is better than Jordan Walker's current arm in right field. Is what I would assume that is probably referencing.
Oh, man.
I mean, you'd rather have neither, but...
Yeah. I think I'm going to forget that. I think the strong arm for Walker allows him to somewhat make up for his lack of range or his inability for routes. I mean, look at the last couple of plays, last couple outs he's made in the outfield, like Vogelback, for example, in that Med series. Ball's over his head. He can make up for that play because he's got a cannon of an arm and he can get him out at second base or make close, allowed a double.
Caught it.
Oh.
A little different.
Maybe.
Better to forget it. The Cardinals' 2024 opening day lineup.
Ooh.
Will include at least one player that is not currently on the Cardinals' 40-man roster.
Oh, I thought we were going to read off the lineup. I got excited. One guy that's not that's in the lineup?
I'm going to forget this. I think that their current 40-man roster includes everybody that will be on their opening day lineup in 2024.
I'm going to ask if there's a caveat here. Is the starting pitcher technically?
No. Not in the lineup.
I mean, technically in the lineup.
No, literally not in the lineup anymore.
I mean, I see him on Baseball Reference when I look at the starting lineup.
No, that's not included.
Well, if we're going by position how it actually is, I'd say bet it. But since we're going by position players, I'm with you. I'm going to forget it. Unless they're adding a center fielder, but I think if you add a center fielder, you're taking away from the money you're going to allocate to the bullpen potentially. And I don't think they'll do that, so I'm going to forget it.
Better to forget it, guys. At least one of Mizzou or Illinois will win 8 games this season.
Bet it. ILL. Mizzou. Yeah, right.
If you were going to bet one of these, which one would you be more likely to bet? 8+ wins this year.
I would truly take Illinois because I think their schedule's easier.
I was wondering about that.
I think their non-con is tougher, but look at their Big Ten schedule. They avoid Michigan. They avoid Ohio State. They've only got, well, I know a couple are ranked, but the only team that I truly look at and go, that's a loss, is Penn State. Otherwise, the rest of their schedule, I could see where they win those games.
And I'm not sure their non-con significantly easier, significantly easier than Mizzou's either. Memphis and K-State's not an easy stone. The other two, like South Dakota, Middle Tennessee, totally with you. Yeah. You should win both of those games by pick your score.
I'm going to be honest. I completely forgot Missouri plays Kansas State. I remembered the Memphis game and forgot about Kansas State. But Missouri, outside of that, their SEC schedule, it's the SEC. That's a gauntlet. You got to play Georgia. They've got LSU. Who's the other top 25 team they got that I'm forgetting? I think there's Tennessee. One more. Tennessee, thank you.
Yeah, they've got 4 top 25 preseason teams on their schedule. K-State, Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU.
And I know, I can't remember if it's Iowa. I know Wisconsin's ranked, but, I could see where those teams end up falling out of the ranking. Yep. Even if, LSU falls out, that's a 9-win team still. So I would bet Illinois.
I would probably bet Illinois as well because of the schedule. But I keep going back to, I think we're underestimating how difficult that game's going to be at Kansas. And I do have a concern of, what if this season starts 1-2? And it's the opposite of last year, where you lose at Kansas. Maybe that's a close game that just goes the other way, and sometimes that stuff happens. You lose against Penn State because Penn State's really good. People think this is the best Penn State team that James Franklin has had there. And now you're going into conference play, and you don't have the same kind of confidence that you were hoping to have. That would be my concern if I'm an Illinois fan. I would take the Illinois side, but that is the one thing that keeps me from being an obvious, definite, no doubt about it. That's the team that you would want to back in this regard.
I'm not concerned about that scenario you just played out because I was really concerned about this team after losing to Connor Bazelak in Indiana last year in a brutal loss in the second game of the year, and that's how they opened up Big Ten play. And then they really bounced back with a couple of blowouts. They
didn't have Penn State after that game last year.
Well, that's true, too. They had the great Wisconsin Badgers, though.
They had them about 3 weeks later. The next game that you had was Virginia. That is a really nice get-right game. And then after that, Chattanooga. This year, Penn State.
Hey, Chattanooga was a good FCS
program. Put that on the table. Coming up next, would you rather bring back Jordan Montgomery this offseason without having to give up any pick in a qualifying offer situation, or sign one of those other third-tier starting pitchers that is the equivalent, basically, of Jordan Montgomery, but you got to give up the qualifying offer? We'll discuss that next here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Last night did not go well for Drew Rom in his MLB debut as the Pirates win 11-1 over the Cardinals in the opener of that series. That will continue tonight as the Cardinals remain in Pittsburgh for game 2 of 3 in this series. It'll be Adam Wainwright looking for a win number 199 going up against Johan Oviedo for the Pirates. First pitch will be at 6:05. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex is out this week. He'll be back in next week. He's got some much-deserved vacation time with his family up in Michigan this week. T-Bone, yesterday, I was going around on Twitter, and this is coming right after the Cardinals lost a tough one, and Drew Rom had a really rough outing. Saw that Jordan Montgomery had another excellent start for the Texas Rangers. He went 8 innings, did not allow a run, struck out 6, walked just 1. So far, since the trade that sent him down to the Texas Rangers, in 4 starts, he's gone 26 innings and has given up a total of 5 earned runs. He has a 1.7 ERA for the Texas Rangers.
Dang.
Opposing hitters have an OPS of below 600 against him.
I miss that guy.
Jordan Montgomery, I think, has become one of those pitchers that, for whatever reason, Major League Baseball evaluates him differently than what his results have been. Over the last 3 years now, this is dating back to since the start of the 2021 season, he's thrown about 500 innings, made 87 starts. He's a consistent 30-start guy. He has a 3.49 ERA. And yet, for some reason, I think Major League Baseball teams view him as a 4. We heard about this going into the trade deadline. The Cardinals are going to be selling him as a 2 or a 3. Teams are going to be buying him as a 4. Not sure that that's totally fair to Jordan Montgomery. I think he is closer to a 3. He's been 20% above league average as a pitcher over 3 full seasons now. He's only 30 years old. This is not a guy that's over the hill or anything. Yeah, he had some injury questions in 2018, 2019, but since then, he's been as consistent as any pitcher that you can find in Major League Baseball. T-Bone, I say all of that to ask this. If I said you could have one of the 2 following scenarios this offseason for the Cardinals, which would you prefer? Option 1, you sign Jordan Montgomery, maybe it's a 4-year deal worth about $20 million a year. Option 2, you sign one of the other pitchers in that range, Yamamoto, Sonny Gray, Lucas Giolito, that are not tied to a qualifying offer, or excuse me, that are, Sonny Gray specifically, tied to a qualifying offer. Let's use that as the example. You have to give up a 2nd-round pick to get him. Would you rather have Jordan Montgomery back or sign Sonny Gray this offseason, given what the results have been for both of those players?
I think I would sign Sonny Gray, and I know the pick is attached, but I think he's got better stuff, and he's proven to be better long-term than Jordan Montgomery has been. So I would side on the side of Sonny Gray, and I know you had to give up the 2nd-round pick, and yes, that sucks, and yes, it's back-to-back years.
And it's a top 35 pick this year.
But you're at a point where we saw what this rotation looked like, and it wasn't Monty's fault, to be clear, that this rotation was bad. But you just need a change. And that's what it is for me, is you just got to get somebody that is different in here. So I don't want to bring back somebody that you just moved on from. I would rather have Sonny Gray give up the pick and be willing to eat that. And then I know I've got a guy that, hey, I know what Sonny Gray is, and I think his stuff is better. I think he's a 2. I think Monty is... He's viewed across baseball as a 4. I think he's probably a 3 is where I would put him. So I would say I would want Sonny Gray. I'm willing to give up that pick and get a guy that I trust. That stuff, I would say, probably projects better than what Jordan Montgomery's does because, I'm a sucker for the Baseball Savant and what their stuff comps to. Would you rather have a guy that's got Joe Musgrove stuff or a guy that's got Derek Holland stuff? And Monty's compares to Derek Holland most, and the guy that I said compares to Joe Musgrove was Sonny Gray. So I'm willing to eat that 2nd-round pick, even though it's going to be a high one. I'm willing to give that up to go get a guy like Sonny Gray that I know that what I'm getting each year, and I think he's better than Jordan Montgomery.
The 2nd-round pick is what makes me squeamish here. I think you can make a case. I love Sonny Gray. You know that, T-Bone. That's my guy. I've been talking about Sonny Gray all season. I've been talking about Sonny Gray for a year and a half now, since last trade deadline of, hey, could you find a way to go get Sonny Gray now that they've got Tyler Mahle? He's a guy that I've really wanted. But This is how I think you talk yourself into a Yamamoto or Imanaga or going out and getting maybe Lucas Giolito. If you end up with, I don't think they're going to do this, but let's say that they're willing to actually spend some serious money this offseason. If you end up with a guy like Nola as your quote-unquote number one starter, whether you agree with him being classified as a 1 or not, that's the guy that will start opening day for the Cardinals next year. Everybody's got to have a number 1. He would be your number 1. And then you go back to the market and you say, okay, our options are like going out and getting Montgomery or Yamamoto or Giolito or Gray. I could see how they would talk themselves into one of the guys that's not attached to the qualifying offer because of where they're picking this year. It is a lot easier to convince yourself, hey, this pick's like 55. Let's go ahead and give it up for the right to sign whoever the top of the market guy is that you're looking at. Or we can go with option 2 and not have to give that up. This year, it's a top 35 pick. Now, the one thing that I think is probably worth noting here, if the Cardinals sign Aaron Nola, they're going to have to give up a qualifying offer pick for him as well. Yeah. So that would really be your second round pick that you're giving up. Adding another one to that would actually be the third round pick that you're talking about here. So maybe the calculus does change a little bit there, but it's just really hard to convince yourself a second and third round pick for the right to be able to sign or to fix this rotation. I would rather just give up that second round pick. So I could convince myself that that Montgomery is the guy for this team. I just think they need a change, though.
Agreed.
I think you need to do something different next year. So if that ends up meaning going out and getting Yamamoto or Imanaga, and that's what the rotation looks like because you just need something different, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. T-Bone, you also heard something. John Mozeliak was on KSDK over the weekend with Frank Cusimano. And you heard something that he said. He said, this is what makes me nervous about the Cardinals going into this offseason. Let's take a listen to what John Mozeliak had to say, and I want to hear what your thoughts were on this, T-Bone.
Well, there's definitely some depth. I don't know if it has the excitement of past years when you talk about like aces, but I do feel like there's going to be some options for us.
When you heard that, your thoughts were what?
There is an ace on the market. I think maybe you can make the argument that there are 2, depending on how you view Aaron Nola. But Blake Snell's an ace. There's no if and but about it.
Oh, our text line's about to be mad at you.
Yeah, I don't care. Blake Snell is an ace. And I know he only goes 5 innings. I don't care. That guy's stuff's electric. He could win the Cy Young this year. That's how good he is. He has a chance to lead Major League Baseball in ERA while also leading Major League Baseball in walks. And yes,
he's an ace. You got to be able to control your stuff if you're an ace,
wrong.
My friend.
That is wrong thinking. That's my fear of the Cardinals.
You know how many times he's gone more than 6 innings this year?
Oh, boy. I'll go like 4 times.
Grant, you can guess on this as well. How many times do you think Blake Snell, who, as T-Bone just said, might be in the conversation for the Cy Young in the National League this year, leads the league in ERA. How many times do you think he's gone more than 6 innings this season?
Assuming that it's going to be lower than what a lot of people think, I'll say 5.
I'm going 4.
1. He has gone more than 6 innings 1 time. Now, to be fair, he has gone exactly 6 innings 12 times. So what they do is they get him through 6, and then they have no interest in getting him out there for that 7th inning. Can you be an ace if that's the case for you?
I think you can be. I think that's modern baseball. And my fear is the Cardinals aren't going to do a full
I think
push
that's
towards
modern postseason baseball. I do think there's something to the idea of eating innings in the regular season. Because if I did the same thing with Aaron Nola, do you know how many times Aaron Nola has gone more than 6 innings this season?
I'm sure he's a lot. I'm sure it's like 15. It's probably more than that.
Who'd you guess on that one, Grant?
I'm going to stick to 5.
12.
Okay.
12 times. So one of them has done it 12 times. The other has done it once. There's value in that, man. Over the course of a season, that starts to add up where those innings are not put on your bullpen and they are instead held by the guy that is your quote-unquote ace, your horse, right? That's the guy that's going to ride. We're going to ride to the finish line. When you get to the postseason, I'm totally with you. Blake Snell is exactly the type of pitcher that I want. We're going to get him through 5 or 6 innings. We're getting to our lockdown bullpen. We're going to win this game because he gave us the chance. Regular season, though, I think it is a little bit different there.
See, here's where I would push back of, do you need a workhorse? I would probably agree with that, but does he need to be the ace? Like, I look at Miles Michaelis. I think he's the workhorse innings guy for the Cardinals, but he's not an ace. He covered 200 innings last year. Was he an ace last year? No, but he's a guy that I know when he takes the ball every day, he's probably going 6 innings, and I can probably bank him down for 180 to 200 innings each year. I just think when you look at like a Blake Snell, you look at a Spencer Strider, who's not a free agent, but he's kind of who I kind of look at as the Blake Snell equivalent when you're looking at a team that has a guy under cost control. Absolutely sign me up for those guys. They've got swing and miss stuff. You don't have to worry about them getting guys that you're going to have long. Sure, it's not going to be 6-7 innings. It's going to be 5 dominant innings, and then I can turn things to my bullpen. My fear, though, is they're not going to go completely modern baseball are the Cardinals. Michaelis should be what they view as their innings eater next year. The ace does not have to be an innings eater. He's got to miss bats, and then he can get you into the postseason. I think the modern starting pitcher, your top guy's going to cover 180 innings, and you've got to accept that.
I don't have any problem with that. I think Blake Snell is not a guy that necessarily even gives you 180 innings. He might be 150 innings. I mean, right now he's at 135 innings and he started 25 games. If you get him to, let's say, 5 more starts, he's going to be at like 160, 165. The last time that Blake Snell threw more than 180 innings was 2018, and he got to 180.2. So, like, he is a guy that is a consistent 150 inning type of a pitcher, and that's when he was in his 20s and now is in his age 30 season. T-Bone, I'm saying all of this because when you're talking about the top end of the pitching class, we have to nitpick here. Like, Blake Snell's awesome, and if I could have him on his current contracts, do you know how quickly I would sign up for that? Dude, it would be in a heartbeat. But we're talking about paying $30 million a year over a 5+ year deal for a guy that's going to be 31 years old, leads the league in walks so far this season, does not throw 150+ innings very often. This is a year where he's in his walk season. He's incredibly motivated, and he's now going to probably get just over that. Great swing and miss stuff, no doubt about it, but has some real questions here. It's how I think that you end up with the Aaron Nola signing. And I don't think that Aaron Nola would be a bad signing by any stretch. He eats innings, which is a huge piece to it, but he's also got really good swing and miss stuff. He's got strikeout rates that are up there with some of the best pitchers that we talk about in Major League Baseball. No, he's not Spencer Strider. No, he's not Blake Snell. But he's like tier 2 or 3 of like legit strikeout candidate. And he's got all the makeup stuff that the Cardinals absolutely love. We can laugh at that stuff, but it does matter. So I think Blake Snell would be the guy that I would attach my, like, hey, BK stamp of approval goes to who? It goes to Aaron Nola for me. Blake Snell would not get that same BK stamp of approval.
Well, and the other thing with
That's
that, though,
tough to get, man. You can't just get that for anybody.
Oh, come on. And Kyle Gibson got the BK stamp of approval.
For what they needed. If the Cardinals needed a 5-starter this offseason, we would be talking about different pitchers. I'd be talking about James Paxton. If that's what they needed, I would say the BK stamp of approval goes to James Paxton. But for this offseason, you need a 1. And the number 1 that this team needs is Aaron Nola, not Blake Snell.
I don't disagree with that. I just don't know if you need him to be an innings eater, because I think Michaelis is the innings eater. Like, when you look at San Diego, who's the innings eater for that team? Because it's not Snell. It's Joe Musgrove or it's Yu Darvish. Musgrove's hurt, so he's probably not that guy. I think Michaelis, and then I guess whoever you want to bring, like Gray would be the other guy that I would bring in, I guess, in this scenario. But I guess he's going to be QO'd.
And he's 150 innings.
I don't view innings as such a massive thing that you're going to need in free agency, because I just want guys that miss bats and are electric. And that's, like, I'm not pushing back on Nola. I want to be clear. Like, if they sign Aaron Nola, I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is our off season. No, I'm going to be here excited about it. But I just don't think they should go, Snell doesn't, 150 innings. We don't like that. You don't like him missing bats? Like, come on. Like, that's the guy they should be targeting.
I do, but I'm
not yelling at you. I'm yelling at Mo. I'm sorry. I got to project.
I do view him as a guy that I would love to have for 2024. But we're not just making a decision for 2024. We're making a decision for the next 5 years, right? You don't marry somebody because you had a really nice date with them and you had a nice night afterwards. Like, you marry them because you want to spend the rest of your lives with them. I would love to have one night, not me specifically, but
well, clip it.
Blake Snell is a guy that you date, not a guy that you marry. No. When it comes to what he is as a starting pitcher.
I'm ready for that emotional roller
Aaron
coaster.
Nola is the guy that you introduce to your parents. You take him home, you go on a vacation together, and you spend the rest of your life. He is, Nicholas Sparks writes books about Aaron Nola. Not Blake Snell, man. Blake Snell's the bad guy in the books that Nicholas Sparks writes.
I'm a sucker for the bad boy.
He's the side piece, and you don't need that right now. Don't get the wandering eye. Go out there and meet the guy of your dreams. That's Aaron Nola, man. It is. This offseason, he is the one that you need to go out there and acquire. Don't go get the fun, new, shiny toy. Get the guy that is going to be sustainable for you for years to come. Go marry the accountant. That dude's going to have a job for the rest of his life. Don't marry the guy in radio. We're going to get
marry the
fired
guy
next week.
in radio.
Coming up next, we're diving into the Junk Drawer here on 101 ESPN. All right, let's dive into the Junk Drawer alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in the 1 o'clock hour, we will give you not one, but 2 chances to win a pair of lawn tickets to see Shinedown with special guest Papa Roach next Sunday night, September 3rd at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater at 1:30. We'll be giving you an opportunity to go up head-to-head against our guy T-Bone in a Finish the Lyrics game. We'll get into that coming up at 1:30. Stay tuned for your chance to win a pair of tickets to see Shinedown. But right now, it is time for the Junk Drawer. T-Bone, what do you got for us today?
BK, I know you're big into bicycling since you got a Peloton.
I am, okay.
How would you like to do?
I consider myself big into bicycling, but I do have a Peloton.
I thought if you had a Peloton, you were just into it. So maybe I've been reading the situation wrong. But how would you feel about completing a 100-mile cycling race in Steamboat Springs, Colorado?
First of all, I would never do that because I have no interest in cycling 100 miles. I would love to go to Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Colorado's wonderful this time of the year.
So I almost kind of want to do this because Reggie Miller did it. Reggie
really?
Miller entered in a race to do this. It was a 100-mile race in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. The 57-year-old Reggie Miller, he finished 370th out of 926, which is impressive, and he was able to complete this race in under 7 hours.
Damn.
Well, with his average speed around 15 miles per hour.
Who is the guy that you would be most curious to see, like, what they could do if they were in one of these kinds of competitions? Like, the former athlete that you're like, I bet you they're just absolutely out there dominating. Is there a former, like, I think Ozzy would be excellent in something like this. I don't know if it would specifically be, like, bicycling, but doing something post-retirement where he is up against, like, a typical human being that is not a professional athlete. I think Ozzy would be unbelievable.
I would say, well, like, I would love, like, MJ. Would MJ be, like, a guy that would be in phenomenal shape to still do this? I mean, he still plays basketball all the time. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that kind of sticks out to me here in St. Louis that I would want to see do this.
Graham, is there any former Blues that immediately
Vince Coleman comes to mind.
Oh, for sure.
Coleman still looks like he could
Coleman
steal
could
70
go out there
bags.
and play center field for the Cardinals.
Yeah. Oh, I'd take him over Tommy Edman.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of someone that would fit this mold, too, that seems
Jamie
like they just
Rivers,
do everything right.
I've got to say it. The former superstar Blues defenseman. He would be great.
That's what we all thought.
Yeah.
We just assumed.
What about, I was going to say Pronger. Would Pronger be able to do that still? He probably would.
I feel like he's in great shape.
I could see that. Al McInnes, too.
Oh, Al McInnes for sure.
Yeah. He'd probably be my guy.
Somebody said Hines Ward recently completed a triathlon.
Well, that's
Hines
impressive.
Ward was an awesome football player.
Oh,
Do you remember Hines Ward? Are you old enough to, like, really appreciate?
Kind of barely. I don't know if I would say I would appreciate, but I do remember him being a part of those Steelers teams.
Hines Ward was one of the more underrated players.
Who was his teammate alongside him? It was Ward and Sergio Holmes?
Santonio Holmes, I think.
Santonio Holmes, yeah. That's who I'm thinking of. What are you laughing about over there?
Cardinals just made a roster move.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
I mean, they did have to send down Drew Rom.
No.
Oh, no? Oh, God. Well, you're laughing.
I've got a good one for you.
This belongs in the junk drawer, clearly.
I'll give you 3 guesses on the pitcher that the Cardinals just called up.
Oh, did they just select another contract?
Breaking news, by the way, the Cardinals have placed Matthew Liberatore on the 15-day injured list, retroactive to August 19th.
Oh, okay.
Surprise, the back issue was a little more significant, apparently, than what they originally anticipated.
Okay, so what they should do here is select McGreevy or Graceffo, so we could find out about somebody. But my guess is they're just going to have Thompson start on Wednesday. Okay, I've pulled up the Memphis roster. Is it Grant Black?
No.
Jacob Barnes.
Hey, ding, 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 ding.
Let's go.
Only took a couple tries.
I'm impressed. Well done, sir. Jacob Barnes, would you guess, is he on the 40-man roster currently?
I know he's not on the 40-man roster.
Sure isn't. My God, man.
Is he stretched out? Can he be a long man for us?
I think he is a quote-unquote starter.
Oh, good. When did he last appear in the big leagues?
He's not a starter.
Oh, he was with the Yankees last year for a game.
He is 33 years old. Jacob Barnes has appeared in 11 games for the Memphis Redbirds. Has actually been quite good for them. 17 innings, has a 1.5 ERA for them. So has been legitimately effective in his time down in Memphis. Doesn't have great swing and miss stuff, but it's there nonetheless. Yeah, so that's the guy that's going to come up for you. In his previous stop, he was with the Phillies, had a 4.2 ERA for them, and before that, he was with the Texas Rangers AAA affiliate, had a 2.2 ERA there.
Man, this sounds like a great roster move. Why are you freaking out over there?
I'm not even freaking out. I just find it to be hilarious. genuinely hilarious that they just sent down Guillermo Zuniga, who is this. He's on the 40-man. And instead, they called up Jacob Barnes, who has zero future in St. Louis.
I have a follow-up question. What's the plan with Drew Rom?
I would assume he's probably going to get another start.
Oh, he's going to take Libertor's spot now? Probably for... Oh, good.
That would be my guess, right? He'll make two more starts for you.
I didn't even put two and two together with Libertor going out. I bet you're right. I bet we're going to see Rom the rest of the way until... Because Libertor's going to miss at minimum 2 starts, maybe 3. Because this will be a 15-day IL stint.
Yeah, I would assume he'll miss at least the next 2. It's a back issue, so probably more.
Good.
Somebody on the text line asks what is, I think, a fair question. Why didn't they just pick up Michael Givens? Why didn't they claim him off of waivers?
I don't know.
I genuinely do not know. The Cardinals would tell you that it's impossible to manage the 40-man roster.
Oh, so tough.
It is impossible.
Well, 37-man roster. They got 3 openings. Or 2. Yeah. Something like that.
Hey, since we're in the junk drawer, I figured this applied. Did you see Paul DeYoung
signed
with the Giants?
San Francisco.
Cool.
What a steal for San Fran.
On the plus side, none of these games matter.
Yeah.
And I will accept that.
Good thing we're still competitive.
Coming up next, if you wanted to hear one positive thing from John Mozeliak over the weekend, hey, we did actually hear that. Let's get some positivity in our lives coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Coming up in about 30 minutes or so, we'll play Finish the Lyric game. You'll go up against Tanner Hendrickson, and either you will go home with a pair of tickets to see Shinedown on September 3rd at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater, or if T-Bone wins, we're opening it up to the text line. So T-Bone's playing for the texters. The caller, of course, will be playing for he or herself. We'll do that coming up at 1:30. But right now, I want to talk a little bit of positivity about the Cardinals, because there's been a lot of negative that's taking place lately, and there's really no way to hide from that. The Cardinals are non-competitive right now, and if you missed it just a little bit ago, they officially announced that Matthew Liberatore is heading to the injured list because, of course, yesterday it was no doubt about it. Matthew Liberatore going to be making his start for the Cardinals on Wednesday, and then today it's back issue. Still going to be there. Not going to be making his start on Wednesday, so we're going to have to put him on the injured list, and I don't even remember the gentleman that they called up.
Barnes. How could you forget him?
Jacob Barnes is going to be number 61 for the Cardinals. He's been selected to the roster from the Memphis Redbirds.
You can polish this turd. Come on, you got it.
I would rather see Zuniga.
We can't. If we got. Oh, wait, no, yeah, they could.
Yeah, I would rather see Zuniga. I genuinely don't understand.
We need more length.
This guy's not stretched out. There is no explanation whatsoever why Jacob Barnes is getting opportunities over Zuniga. But that's the negative. Let's set that aside.
Relax.
Instead, let's talk about some of the positive. So John Mozeliak was on with Frank Cusimano on Sunday with the Sports Plus show, and he was asked about the young pitchers, including Matthew Liberatore, who are competing for that number 5 spot right now. They're getting a showcase down the stretch. And T-Bone, I think one of the concerns that you, and really more so Alex, has had about the Cardinals the rest of the way is, are they going to fall for something here? Are they going to fall for fool's gold with one of Hudson, Liberatore, or Thompson, and then go into the offseason and instead of signing or trading for 3 starting pitchers, they get 2? And maybe one of those guys is less than what we were expecting. And so now you go into next season, maybe you get a Nola, but then the second guy is like James Paxton, and then they trust Matthew Liberatore to be the 5. That's unacceptable this offseason. Well, John Mozeliak was asked about that exact scenario, and here's what he had to say.
When you say, where does a Libby or Thompson fit in, they might be in the rotation. So that means maybe one of the starters we sign ends up having to go into the bullpen. So we'll see, but I'm certainly excited what we're seeing out of Liberatore most recently. Thompson's been throwing the ball well. But I don't want it to be just because they finish strong means we're not going to still try to be aggressive.
Look, I'm glad to hear that from Mo. I'm glad to hear that they're not going to let any performance from the last 6 weeks or really the last 2 months here change their offseason plans. They do need 3 major league starters. And all these guys right now, what are they doing? Yeah, it's good to see if they have success. Like if Thompson continues to have success, that's great to see. If Hudson continues to have success, that's great to see. Drew Rom proves the haters named T-Bone wrong, then that's great to see. But those guys are all depth pieces for next year. You should plan on all those guys at least being in AAA. Maybe one of them is in your bullpen as a long reliever. So I'm glad to hear Mo's kind of sticking with this, and he's continued to stick with this. It's not like this has been fluctuating of, we only need 2 starters. No, we do need 3. No, we do need 2 because we've seen performances. He's stuck pat since the trade deadline of, we are going to add 3 starters. And that's good. That's good to hear that they're not changing their tone. Now, we'll see if that changes once you get to the offseason because the market changes. Maybe they go from shopping in that top tier for 2 starters to 1 because the prices get too expensive. Then they go to the second tier, or the 4th tier, I should say, for those other 2 starters. But it's good to hear that Mo's not changing his stance on, hey, we need 3 starters. We need 3 major league caliber starters this offseason, and that they're not going to be counting on anybody to be the number 5 from the inside the organization going into this year.
Yeah, there is no room for interpretation here. John Mozeliak has made it abundantly clear, not once, not twice, but 3+ times now publicly, stating the Cardinals will acquire 3 starting pitchers this offseason. Starting pitchers. This is not, we're going to go out there and get a Matt Moore who has started previously and maybe will be extended this off. No. This is 3 starting caliber pitchers that made starts in 2023, not as openers, but as legit starters that are going to be added to the rotation for the Cardinals in 2024. This is not like last offseason when he said, hey guys, payroll is going to be going up. And then by the most technical of definitions, payroll did indeed go up last year or going into this year. There's not that interpretation here. John Mozeliak is putting it out there, I think both for the fans and for ownership, that this team needs 3 starters. I think the audience that he's speaking to here, it's a TV show, so he's speaking to the fan base. You know who else he's talking to? He's talking to Bill DeWitt Jr. Because I bet you these are the conversations that are taking place internally where DeWitt is asking him, what do we need? How do we avoid this from ever happening again? Because DeWitt sees those seats. When Mike Matheny got fired, part of the reason why was because they could see a scary trend of people not going to the games at Busch Stadium anymore. It was empty on the upper level, in the upper deck at Busch. It doesn't happen here. Now, Sunday is an outlier because it was hot as hell and you couldn't have paid me to go to that game. But there have been some trends recently where the attendance, even the announced attendance, which is fungible, has been much lower than what you would typically expect for Cardinals games. So DeWitt sees that and he's saying to himself, we cannot have this again in the future. And he's asking Mo, what do we need to do to prevent this? And Mo is telling him 3 starters. Not 1, not 2, 3 starters. So that does make me feel a lot better if I'm a Cardinals fan going into the offseason. They see what you see, and they know, let's not get too attached to any of these young guys. If they end up winning a job over one of the starters that we trade or sign for, great. But if not, we've got that insurance there ready to go.
Now, the only thing that would be a quote-unquote concern, if you want it from this, because I think you're right. I think he is talking to ownership. What do we need? We need 3 starters. Now, the question is, how much are you willing to spend on the 3 starters? And that'll be the whole conversation in the offseason, because it's obvious you need 3 starters. But how much of that checkbook is going to go to get those 3 starters? Because you could settle for 1 guy in the top tier and then settle for 2 in the bottom. But then you're missing a clear number 2 in my mind. And that's where the kind of pessimistic side of me would come out is, yeah, okay, they're saying the right things about the 3 starters. Now they got to go prove it with their actions and the tiers that they're shopping in, too. It can't be 1 top-tier guy and then you go bargain bin shopping for the other 2. They need probably 2 guys in the top, 3 tiers this offseason. Yep. You need a Sonny Gray, a Yamamoto, a Snell, a Nola. You need like 2 of those guys. And then it's okay to settle on that 4th or that 3rd guy being in that bottom tier, the James Paxtons of the world. It's okay to have 1 of those guys. You can't settle for 2. You got to shop in that top echelon of the starting pitching market this season. And I think that's what the conversations are behind the scenes of, okay, what do we need? Yeah, we need 3 starting pitchers. Okay, how much is it going to cost? It's going to cost a lot. And it's going to cost us a lot of years, too, probably. Yep. We're going to have to get uncomfortable this offseason if we don't want to have what happened this year happen again.
So the other thing that they need to figure out is the bullpen. And yesterday, Ryan Helsley, it was announced that he's going to undergo another round of tests and evaluations. He's been out since June 10th. This is now 2+ months of him being on the IL. He went down and did a rehab assignment. He experienced pain. There was tightness. He is now stopping the rehab assignment. He's been paused again. And we don't really know what's coming out of this. It's the flexor tendon. We all know that's not good. That's not what you want to have. I don't care what comes out of this, whether he ends up, it's announced 2 weeks from now that he's going to get surgery, or they say, you know what, we're going to shut him down for the rest of the year. We believe he's going to be ready to go by the start of spring training. Either of those is possible, I suppose. This team needs to add significant assets to its bullpen. And by that, I do not mean spend $20 million on top end of the market relievers, but go out there and get guys that are steady. Go out and get this year's version of Andrew Chafin or Matt Moore, who are just quality big league relievers. Because T-Bone, part of what we're learning right now by them calling up Jacob Barnes and Casey Lawrence and Andrew Suarez and trading for John King and him immediately being installed as one of their best relievers, them having Drew Verhagen, who right now is their 3rd most trusted bullpen arm. This team does not have any depth in its minor league system when it comes to the bullpen. None. And next year, you're not going to probably have a guy like Matthew Liberatore coming out of your pen. My guess is he's going to be in the rotation down in AAA because they want him to be a starter. I think they want Zach Thompson at this point to be a starter in the big leagues if he's going to be here. So you have no depth. You have no guys that you can call upon to be a part of this bullpen on that Memphis shuttle. You need to create that. You need to go out there and sign, whether it's guys to minor league deals or veterans to big league deals that can come in and immediately slot into like the 6th and 7th inning mix. I don't want Andre Palante throwing in the 7th inning next year. His role should be lung reliever, and you need a ground ball, bring him into to finish that inning. That's it. That is his role. He's been overextended this year to be asked to be something more than that. Right now, you got 2 guys that you really trust. It's JoJo and it's Gio. I have nobody beyond that. And right now, my confidence in Gio is honestly waning.
Yeah, and I think there's only, 3 guys that I say you can definitely guarantee have a job on the opening day roster in the bullpen: JoJo, Gio, and Helsley if he's healthy. I think that's the only 3. Like, I know John King's pitch well, but I think he's going to have to compete for a spot in the bullpen for the opening day spot. Same for Andre Palante. That $20 million that you mentioned for the bullpen, yeah, you're not investing that in one guy. You're not going to go just add a Josh Hader and be done.
Sure.
Because that doesn't solve anything. Yeah, you got an electric arm. You need multiple electric arms.
It also takes away money that you could be spending on your rotation, too.
Exactly. And I'm going to use the $20 million as the kind of the number here. If $20 million is what you say, okay, we're allocating this amount to the rotation, and we've got $20 million we can still spend, and we're going to put in the bullpen, it should go to like 2, probably 3 guys. And then the other arms that you bring in, to your point, are either minor league deals, or you start trading from your surplus of the pieces you have. Juan Yepes, does he have a future here? No, can we get a decent bullpen arm for him? Even if it is a guy that's on the AAA shuttle bus, he doesn't have to be a proven big league bullpen arm. We can go get our next version of JoJo Romero. You got JoJo Romero for Edmundo Sosa, a utility player. Can you do that with some of the pieces that you have on your roster? If you are trading Tommy Edman, do you look for a legitimate bullpen arm if you're going to move Tommy Edman? I think all these kind of questions have to be asked on all these names that are out there for the trade market, and also when it comes to free agency, about $20 million for 3 arms.
Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, you'll have a chance to win a pair of tickets to see Shinedown if you go up against Tanner Hendrickson in a Finish the Lyric game. We'll tell you how you can get involved with that coming up next. Plus, what are the lessons that can be learned from college football in 2022? There's 2 that immediately stand out to me. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK. Do you remember that childhood piggy bank that you had, the satisfaction that you felt when you were finally able to reap the rewards of all of those diligent savings? Well, with Truehold, you can access your biggest piggy bank yet, your home's equity. You'll start enjoying the retirement that you plan for right now, and you don't even have to move. Here's how you do it. Truehold will buy your home for its best current value, and you get to bank all the cash now while you continue living in your home for as long as you'd like. Plus, Truehold will cover all the property taxes, insurance, repairs, and maintenance too. And since they pay your home's current value in cash, that money is yours to do whatever you'd like with. So start enjoying your home's equity while it remains high by visiting Truehold.com, and you'll discover how much they'll buy your home for today based on its best current value. Call 1-855-300-9993, or you can visit them at Truehold.com to find out the smarter and faster way to cash out on your home's full value without having to move. That's 1-855-300-9993, or visit them at Truehold.com. So when you think about the lessons that we can learn from college football last season and how we apply them to the season this upcoming year, there are a couple that I think immediately stand out. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We'll give you a chance to win a pair of tickets to see Shinedown coming up in our next segment. At the end of this segment, we'll tell you how you could potentially get involved to go head-to-head against Tanner Hendrickson in a Finish the Lyric game. I think you might be able to beat him in this. We'll get into it coming up here in just a little bit. T-Bone, The Athletic had their piece earlier today on their 12 lessons from college football last year that we can apply to the upcoming season. There were a couple that I really think we can kind of hone in on that I think change the way that I view college football going into the upcoming year in particular. I would say the first one is how important the transfer quarterbacks have become. Because when you look back at last season, man, I mean, you're Illinois Fighting Illini. Their season completely changed because they got a legitimate quarterback into the mix last season. If not for that, they wouldn't have been the same team that we saw last year. I think the same thing could also be said, though, for some other schools. LSU, for example. What would they have been last year if they didn't have Jaden Daniels as their starting quarterback? I certainly don't think they would have been a team that finished in the top 20 in the country when it came to the rankings. They wouldn't have been a team that people were really excited about going into this year. We can also apply that to 2023. When you look at some of the teams that are at or near the top of the rankings this year, look at who's starting at quarterback. LSU, I just mentioned them, Jaden Daniels. USC, the guy that's probably the Heisman favorite this year, transfer quarterback, Caleb Williams. Now, we saw him last year there, but now it's year 2 in that same system at USC with Lincoln Riley. You look, for example, to a team like Notre Dame. Why is it that people are so high on Notre Dame this year? Well, they have a quarterback, finally. Hartman coming over from Wake Forest. Mizzou fans, you saw him, unfortunately, in the bowl game. He is incredibly productive. He's not a perfect quarterback. I don't know that he's a legitimate NFL prospect, but he's a guy that can come in and immediately win a bunch of games for you over at Notre Dame. For me, that's one of the biggest lessons from last year to this year is don't underestimate the impact that a transfer quarterback can have his first season on campus.
Yeah, transfer quarterbacks, it's either going to be the high or the low. And I think Illinois has experienced this on both ends of the spectrum. They saw it last year with Tommy DeVito, who was a good quarterback. He was an average quarterback, but that's what they needed with that team. With that offense around Chase Brown and the defense that they had, like they were able to win 8 games because of that. But then you also can have the lows of lows, as we've seen. Illinois had Brandon Peters, who just did not work out, and that led to the lows of lows. But I think you're right. I think transfer quarterbacks can come in and immediately impact programs, and we'll see who is the team that ends up benefiting from it the most and who ends up being the team like Caleb Williams, for example. It's tough to wait around for a freshman quarterback to come in because, 1, you're probably not going to start them right away, and 2, just in the transfer portal, they're going to leave to the next best opportunity to where they have a shot to start. So I think it is a lesson to be learned where that is where teams like Missouri, for example, in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, when they lose a Brady Cook or they lose Sam Horn, they can look to the transfer portal to replace them rather than saying, okay, we got to go find our next quarterback out of high school, because that's really tough to do. Transfer portal, there's always going to be guys available. It's just whether or not you can evaluate the right guy or not.
So some of the quarterbacks that could fit into the criteria that we're talking about right now, I mentioned Sam Hartman. I think my expectations for Notre Dame this year are higher because in previous seasons, I didn't trust their offense, and I didn't trust their quarterback specifically. I trust Sam Hartman. I've seen that guy be productive at Wake Forest. If he can do it there, and I know that's a good offensive system for quarterbacks, but if he can do it there, I absolutely think he can do it with better talent around him at Notre Dame. One of the teams that I don't really know how to evaluate right now is Kentucky, because last season they took such a significant step back. That offensive line was terrible. And Will Levis had an awful season because he was hurt for most of the year. Devin Leary's coming in. He was formerly of NC State. He was a really good player for them there. Dealt with some nagging injuries there as well. If he's the same player at Kentucky that he was when healthy at NC State, I think Kentucky might be a better team in the SEC East than what any of us are currently anticipating. I think those are probably the biggest players / teams that fit into the criteria that we're talking about here. But somebody's going to surprise. Somebody that wasn't a significant player elsewhere is going to come into their new team and it's going to be like, whoa, I didn't see this coming. They were a backup elsewhere, and now they go into their new team, and they made them from a 6-win team to a 9 or a 10-win team. I don't know who that player is today, but there will be somebody that fits into that criteria by the end of the season.
Yeah, and one guy that I'm fascinated to see just because he had so much hype when he was at Clemson coming out of high school is DJ Uiagalelei, and he's at Oregon State now. And, look, I don't think Oregon State's going to be a team that is, competing for the Pac-12 title game. But if you have a quarterback that can take that step, I didn't think Bo Nix would take Oregon to the next level because I thought he kind of underperformed at Auburn. But he goes to Oregon, has a really good year. Same with, I guess Michael Penix did prove it at Indiana for that 1 year before he got hurt. But he was the other name that last year went to Washington, and Washington took the next step. And he's there again this year to where they are a potential threat in the Pac-12. So DJ Uiagalelei is another one that I would throw in here that I don't think Oregon State's the team to beat in the Pac-12 by any means or a team that's contending. But I'm fascinated to know what he looks like as he transfers there.
So the guy that is projected currently to be the starting quarterback at Nebraska, from last I checked, was Jeff Sims. If you're not familiar with him, he was previously the quarterback at Georgia Tech. And the reason why I find this one to be interesting is because he is very much a running threat as a quarterback. I'm fascinated to see what it looks like in year one of Rule at Nebraska. I think they're going to be pretty bad this season. But that's the kind of thing where maybe you get a little something interesting there. So he's another guy to keep an eye on here, is Jeff Sims over at Nebraska. All right, the other thing that The Athletic listed that I find to be really interesting is that Alabama no longer deserves the benefit of the doubt in terms of being the best team in the country, the team that is unbeatable. Every year they come into the season and they are the team to beat. Do you feel that way, T-Bone? Do you feel like they've lost that sense of inevitability about them?
I think so, because they've disappointed the last couple of years. And I know, you look at their overall record and you go, really? Could they disappoint? Yeah, the expectation is a championship in Alabama. And they are not the top dog in the SEC anymore. That belongs to Georgia. So I think Georgia's kind of taken on that role of Alabama. And I don't think Alabama has the benefit of the doubt anymore of, hey, let's try. Can they get in? Can we put them in the college football playoff? No, they've got to earn it now. After some disappointing seasons by their standards, they've got to go out there and they've got to earn it. They've got to beat everybody to get into the college football playoff. I don't think they're a team that is, you can look at them and say, you know what? Yeah, it's Alabama. Alabama belongs in here.
The last time that Alabama went into a season with a relative unknown at quarterback was when? I mean, it's been a decade?
Before, I don't know, let's say, before A.J. McCarron? Did they have somebody before that?
Blake Sims would have been the guy, and that probably would have been the closest thing, I think, to us not really knowing. I mean, we're talking about Greg McElroy was prior to A.J. McCarron, so I think the answer is probably Blake Sims, which was 2014, I want to say, was the last time that they had this much of an unknown at the position. But keep in mind, when he was the quarterback, their backfield was Derrick Henry, TJ Yeldon, and Kenyon Drake. He was throwing to Amari Cooper and OJ Howard. They were stacked at every skill position and had NFL offensive linemen as their backups that season. Alabama's a little bit of a different team right now. They have a great defense going into next year. They should, at least. I don't know what their offense is going to look like, man, because none of us really know what they have at the quarterback position, and they don't have the same dominant running backs or running game that they once did. So for me, I totally believe that they have lost the sense of inevitability. That now belongs to the Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC. Georgia has overtaken Alabama as the number one team that every season you go into it in, regardless of what they have talent-wise, regardless of the questions that you have about the roster, you assume that they're going to be able to replace them with similar or better players. That's what they did on the defensive line last year at Georgia. That's what I assume they're going to continue to do on the defensive side of the ball this year as well.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on. I think when you look at Alabama, too many question marks to really say that they're a team that belongs in this conversation is Georgia. I mean, Georgia's one of those where one loss, depending on if they lose to one of their non-con games, then sure, it's a different conversation. Yep. But if it's one loss in the SEC, you just kind of look at that and go, okay, that was just a blip on the radar. Georgia's still a really good football team, probably in the college football playoff conversation. I don't know if I can say that about Alabama anymore. I don't even know. I think their team is probably going to lose more than one game this year. So they have lost that inevitability. Yeah, inevitability.
Rocking it, dude.
Yeah.
That's Tanner Hendrickson. He's Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, we're going to give you a chance to win a pair of lawn seats to see Shinedown with a special guest of Papa Roach. Are you familiar with Papa Roach's work, T-Bone?
No, I'm not familiar with Shinedown.
Next Sunday night, September 3rd at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. Text in right now, 314-399-9646. If you would like to compete in a Finish the Lyric game, this will not be Shinedown related. I want to say that up front. But a Finish the Lyric game that we will play on the other side. If your texture number 101, you can answer the following question correctly. You're going to be going up against T-Bone for that pair of lawn seats. In the junk drawer, T-Bone mentioned a former athlete that competed recently in a bicycling event. Who was that athlete? If you're texture number 101, you're going up head-to-head against T-Bone next here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. About 30 minutes ago, the Cardinals made a roster move. Matthew Liberatore has been placed on the 15-day IL, and the Cardinals have called up from Memphis right-handed pitcher Jacob Barnes. And the Cardinals will be in action tonight, taking on Pittsburgh in the second game of that series in Pittsburgh. It'll be Adam Wainwright looking for his 199th win tonight for the Cardinals, and Johan Oviedo for the Pirates. First pitch will be at 6:05. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. So there was a big concert in St. Louis last night. I don't know if you were familiar with this, T-Bone.
No, I had no idea.
Somebody by the name of Beyonce was in town.
Well, I've heard of her.
You heard of her?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a pretty big deal.
I don't know if I know a lot of her songs.
So Beyonce was in St. Louis. A bunch of people, I would assume even in our listening audience right now, went to that concert last night. Probably right now they're at work and they're thinking to themselves, can't wait to get in my car to jam out to a little Beyonce on the way home. I know T-Bone is among those people. I don't know if he's going to admit to it, but I think he was at the concert last night. And so I wanted to play a Beyonce Finish the Lyric game with T-Bone and with one of you listeners as well. The way this is going to work, T-Bone is basically playing this game for the text line. We also have a caller. I believe his name is Brandon, if I'm not mistaken.
Brandon.
He will be playing for himself, and the winner we'll get a pair of lawn seats to see Shinedown with a special guest, Papa Roach, next Sunday night, September 3rd at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. Now, if you're a texter, don't tune out right, even if the listener wins, because you're going to get a chance to win another pair of tickets in the next segment. So we'll do that coming up here in about 10 minutes or so. The game is very simple, T-Bone. We are going to play a portion of a Beyonce song. After the clip that we play, you've got to just name the next stretch of words, right?
All right.
3 words typically is what comes up. It's mostly the choruses. So I try to make this as easy as possible as I can
good,
on
because
you.
that will really help me.
So you just got to finish the lyric. I'm sure you've seen the game show before. Brandon, you are going to be going up against T-Bone in this game. Thanks for playing along with us today. Do you understand the rules of the game, sir? You'll hear a clip, and then you're going to finish the lyric. You got that?
I got it.
All right, fantastic. The way this is going to work, we've got 2 for each of you, and then we've got a tiebreaker. And Brandon, if we go to the tiebreaker round, that's going to be you that has to finish the lyric. And if you get it right, you'll win. If you get it wrong, then T-Bone will be the winner. Is that fair?
Yeah, we're in trouble. I don't know a single Beyonce song.
Oh, good. This will be an even matchup.
Well. I think you'll do better with this than you expected. Brandon, would you like to go first or second, my friend?
I'll go first.
All right, we're going first. This is song number 1 for Brandon, going after a pair of lawn seats to see Shinedown.
If you like it, you better put a ring on it.
Boom! It's close enough.
Yeah,
I'll give it to
that's
you, my
the only
friend.
one I
Let's
know.
take a listen. T-Bone, how are you feeling? That was like one of the easiest ones. He did well by going with that on the first one.
I already feel like Brandon won because that may have been the only one that I can
Did you know that one?
I did recognize that one. I don't know if I
right.
could have gotten the lyrics, but I would have been close.
So Brandon is 1 for 1. He wasn't exactly on the lyrics, but I'm not going to be a stickler for this. I have a feeling that you guys might struggle a little bit.
I can't tell you how much I hate this game.
All right, T-Bone, you are going up next. Song number 2. Let's hear it.
I truly have no idea. I've never heard that song before in my life.
Can we hear the finish of that one?
I couldn't have even gotten close with a guess on that.
All right, T-Bone is 0 for 1. That's one of her big hits.
It is?
Love on Top. It is indeed. All right, let's go to round number 2. Through round 1, Brandon's up 1-0. Brandon, you are going up again with your second song. Let's hear how you do.
Nope. I got nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I'm with Brandon. I have no
Really?
idea. I have no idea.
Oh, my God. All right, let's take a listen to how it ends. You've never heard that song?
No.
Nope.
All right, so he's 1 for 2. T-Bone, you have a chance to tie this thing up here.
Yeah, I'm feeling
The
really good
final
about that.
song for you here. Let's see what you've got, buddy. I am worried about you. Oh, man.
I have no idea.
Really?
No, I have no idea. Does Brandon know that one? Brandon, do you know the
No chance, man. No chance.
Really?
No. The only one I've known is Put a Ring on It.
Let's hear the end of this one. All right, Brandon, you are going to be the winner of these tickets. I'm going to allow you guys to collaborate. We had one more song that was ready to go just in case this thing went to a playoff between the two of you. Let's see if you can come up with the finish to this one together.
Can, I know, would probably be the first word.
What is it?
Can would be the first word. Outside of that, I have no idea.
I got nothing. You could have picked anybody else, not Beyonce.
Okay, let's take a listen. Crazy right now.
Oh, I did know that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I can't believe this.
I did know that one, actually. I knew the chorus. I didn't know what led up to it.
Beyonce.
Yeah, my wife is screaming at me somewhere right now.
Oh, my God. But you got to let her listen back to this because Beyonce is one of the biggest artists in the world. I just pulled 5 of her top hits that she's ever had in her career as a solo artist. And you guys win a combined 1 for 5 on finishing the chorus.
Put me on the roster. 1 for 5. That'll play all day.
Yeah, that's a 200 batting average.
All right, Brandon. Well, congratulations. You're at least going home with a pair of lawn seats. I don't know that you earned them, but you're going to see Shinedown with special guest Papa Roach. Hopefully that's more up your alley. Brandon, congratulations. Stay on the line for us, man. Thanks for listening today. We'll get all your information, and we'll get you going to the Shinedown concert next Sunday. How did you feel about your performance, T-Bone?
Oh, not good at all. I did recognize that last one after I heard the chorus again, so that one I'm a little disappointed in myself. But otherwise, I had no idea on the 2 that I was given.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 636. Guys, BK's the only one that knows the end of these songs from the 314. Way to know your audience, BK. 95% of the people listening right now don't know these songs.
Yeah, I think you overestimated the percentage of our audience that was going to know Beyonce.
That knows Beyonce?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the texter is right. I think it sits around like 50%.
Text in right now. I am genuinely curious. How many of those do you think you would have gotten correct? That you would have finished those correct?
And tell the truth.
I bet you the
line.
average listener would have gotten at least 3.
No.
At least
no
3 of the 5.
Not if they're telling the truth. Someone said 636. I was 0 for 5. Thank you, 636. At best, you were 2 for 5 text line.
Maybe it's an age thing. Maybe if you're around the age of 30-ish, Beyonce was a big part of my life growing up. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I mean, as I was in like high school and college, these are the songs that you would have heard at a dance or something.
Text line's defending me. 2 out of 5, 1 out of 5, 0,
26-year-old man. I knew every single one of these songs.
All right,
I got
he's
3
the outlier, clearly. He's the outlier. Everybody else is maybe 2. I knew 1, 0.0. Yeah, I think I'm right on. I think about 20% of our audience.
I'm going to disagree with that. I refuse to believe that is the
Jamie's
case.
Vacation Speedo says absolutely 0.
Maybe I'm overestimating you guys.
Yeah, you are. Well, congrats to Brandon. He earned that. That was a tough one.
I'm going to disagree. I don't think he did.
He did earn that. That was tough.
Coming up next, we'll hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind by talking about Drew Rahm's debut and why he's probably going to get another start. We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, if you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. You can also find us on YouTube. You can watch the show live at 101 ESPN STL, or after we are off of the air, you can go back and rewatch the entire show. Again, that's at 101 ESPN STL. It's all presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. So, T-Bone, the way that we started the show today was by talking about Drew Rahm. It didn't go well for him last night. There's no way to say it otherwise. On Bally Sports Midwest after the game, you heard them say that he didn't have a single pitch that was major league quality in that game. It was ugly. And now it looks like we're probably going to see more of Drew Rahm. And the reason why is because the Cardinals announced today Matthew Liberatore is heading to the injured list. He's going to be on the IL for at least the next 10 days or so. So you would think that Drew Rahm would slot into his spot in the rotation. They added Jacob Barnes to the big league roster. He had to be added to the 40-man roster in order to do so. I don't understand anything about the way that the Cardinals are operating right now when it comes to their bullpen. Jacob Barnes doesn't have a future here. Guillermo Zuniga, I don't know what he's going to be long term, but I would like to see more of him to find out if he can be a piece in that bullpen going into next year. I would have liked to have seen him get the call up, but neither here nor there. That's the news of the day today. T-Bone, what'd you make of Drew Rahm's start last night, and what do you want to see from him if he does end up making more starts for the Cardinals?
I want to see if he's going to have a little bit more swing and miss in his outing and see if he can get a secondary pitch that's really going to make a difference for him in his next couple outings with Liberatore going to the IL. The problem for him yesterday, didn't really have any secondary stuff, and they could sit on his fastball, and his fastball doesn't have any life. It sits at 90 on average, so it's going to be hard to win with just a fastball that slow at the big league level. So if he has a secondary pitch, maybe he comes out, maybe it was just nerves in that first start yesterday, and maybe he can come out and showcase himself, but he didn't look like he had quality enough stuff to get away with just a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, and that's what I'm going to be looking for. How does his stuff look in his next outing? Does he have a secondary pitch that is better that will allow him to use the fastball a little bit more?
I just want to see if he settles in. I think that's the biggest thing that I took away from yesterday's game is I think that's his stuff. I think what you saw yesterday is how he throws in the minors. And the difference is the hitters approached it differently. In the big leagues, guys are just not going to swing if you're not throwing it into the zone and your stuff doesn't play up. In the minors, they will. They'll give you those outs, right? And so last night you saw what happens when guys are patient against him and he has to come back into the zone. His stuff doesn't play to where it's going to be a bunch of swing and miss whiff rate into the zone. They're going to clobber that. And I think that's what you're going to see moving forward. I think the difference, though, is yesterday there were a couple of plays that were not made behind him early in that game. Some of them were hard-hit balls that would have been difficult plays, but I think that can, if you're making your big league debut and you've got all of this emotion around you, that can snowball on you. I think that's what happened last night. So one of the reasons why I am curious to see what happens when he does make that next start is, does that change? If he gets out of the first inning unscathed, can he go 5 innings and be kind of a Dakota Hudson type of a start where, yeah, he gets hit a little harder than what you'd like, but he leaves and you look at the line and you're like, that wasn't so bad, really. Threw 90 miles an hour. I'm not totally sure how he got through that game unscathed, but he did. That's what it's like watching Dakota Hudson some nights, and I think it could be what it's like watching Drew Rahm. I think his ceiling is a number 5 starter. I don't think he has much of a future as a bullpen arm. What I think you're going to see is down the stretch this year, we find out, okay, he's a depth starter, probably spends most of next year down in AAA, and if you need a spot start, can come up and give you a serviceable one when needed. That's probably what Drew Rahm's future looks like here in St. Louis, but looks like we're at least going to find out a little more about him the next time that he goes out there for the Cardinals. Right now, if you want a chance to win a pair of seats to see Shinedown in the Lawn, you can go on September 3rd by texting 314-399-9646, and if you can tell us who it was on Bally Sports Midwest that last night said Drew Rahm had non-competitive pitches. He said he didn't have a single pitch that he saw that looked like it was a major league pitch. Tell us the name of the person that said that at 314-399-9646. If your texter number 101, you are getting the pair of lawn seats to see Shinedown. For Tanner Hendrickson, who did a fantastic job today filling in for Alex Ferrario, and Grant Francis, who's going to be in with us this week, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane is coming up next.